Hey guys, tonight we're going someplace absolutely no one should ever go without at least 3 tetanus shots, a wooden club, and an iron stomach. You're about to drop straight into the stinking, swarming chaos of 1800s Manhattan, right into the festering core of the Bohemian slums. This is not your quirky art cafe Bohemia, by the way. No wine-soaked poets with gentle cheekbones and velvet waistcoats. This is Hell's Kitchen and the 5 Points. This is laundry water poured onto your head from the 3rd floor. This is 17 people to a room and a suspicious lack of living rats, because they've already been eaten. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, not just because you feel sorry for me being historically immersed in filth. Drop a comment with your city and time. I want to know where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't remember how you got here. One moment you were staring into your phone, next moment, bam! You're standing on the corner of 10th Avenue and 39th Street, the air thick with coal smoke, dung steam and body odour. Welcome to Hell's Kitchen, baby! Population. Too many, and most of them are already glaring at you. Kids run barefoot down the cobblestones, dodging horse droppings and street fights, with the finesse of cockroaches. You hear 17 languages in a single block, but none of them sound like they want to help you. You're a nobody here, a fresh off the boat maybe, or a native-born poor soul whose luck ran out. Doesn't matter. You've got holes in your boots, if you have boots at all. Your stomach's been empty since yesterday, and the last thing you ate might have been cat. It's hard to tell. You're going to need shelter, work, and maybe a blunt weapon. As the sun sets over the city's low, grimy rooftops, the streets don't quiet down. Oh no, they wake up. You step around a man lying face down in the gutter. He might be dead. He might be drunk. You don't check. Some kids drag a wagon full of scrap metal past you, yelling insults that are both anatomically impressive and wildly inaccurate. You clutch your coat tighter, but the wind slices right through it like a pickpocket's knife. You pass rows of towering tenements, 6 stories high, brick walls cracked like old skin, and fire escapes that look like they were bolted on during a fever dream. Each window is a tiny stage of survival. Women hanging laundry, babies crying, men smoking or just staring into nothing. You think about knocking on a door, but then you smell it. Death, mould, and soup. Someone's making cabbage stew with whatever was cheap and possibly still moving. You duck into an alley because your instincts say you're being followed. You're right. A kid no older than 10 darts past you and nicks your pocket. Congratulations, you just lost your only coin to a pickpocket in suspenders. Honestly, impressive. You're lucky though. You stumble upon a tenement with a cracked sign reading rooms 2 cents. You push open the warped door and are hit by the scent of wet wool and desperation. A man sits behind a desk that's mostly rotten rage. He doesn't look up. Coin, he says. You don't have one. But your look of pure despair convinces him you're not worth the trouble. He waves you to the stairs. You climb, each step groaning under your weight like it's tired of all this nonsense. On the 4th floor, you find your room. A sliver of space with a cot, a bucket, and a cracked window that won't close. It smells like someone died in here last week and someone else moved in anyway. Probably both are still present in some form. You sit on the cot and feel the springs stab you in 6 places. This is home now. Outside you hear a fight break out. Screaming, glass, maybe a gunshot. You flinch, but nobody else does. This isn't unusual. It's Thursday. Let's talk facts since you're new here. The year is 1852. You're in one of the most densely populated places in the world. Manhattan's Lower West Side is packed with recent immigrants. Irish, German, Italian, and increasingly Eastern European. Housing laws? Not a thing yet. Fire safety? That's future talk. Disease control? The sewer runs along the street and dumps straight into the Hudson. You want statistics? By 1850, the average death rate in neighbourhoods like this is nearly double the city average. You probably won't survive this. Quirky fact of the night. This entire neighbourhood gets its name, Hell's Kitchen, not because of the heat or the crime, but because a reporter once overheard a policeman say, "This place is hell," and the other replied, "Hell is a mild climate compared to this kitchen." Somehow it stuck. And here's a debate for the scholars. Some argue that these slums, as horrible as they were, birthed the American middle class, that the tenacity, the grit, the shared trauma, it built communities that climbed out. Others say that's romanticising suffering, that no one should have had to start here just to end up halfway okay. You'll have time to ponder that if you survive long enough. You lie back on the cot and stare at the ceiling. There's a hole. Through it, you see the floorboards above, and the blinking eyes of a rat the size of a raccoon. You both blink. You decide to name him Edgar. You close your eyes. You try not to breathe too deeply. Tomorrow you find work, or food, or some way to not end up in a gutter with your shoes stolen and your name forgotten. Welcome to the Bohemian slums. Sleep tight. Morning in the slums doesn't begin with birdsong. It starts with someone yelling about a missing shoe and a baby screaming like it just learned about taxes. You open your eyes to pale grey light, filtering through the cracked window, making the dust in the air look like falling ash. Edgar the rat is gone. Either he's off to his morning shift or he's decided you're not interesting enough to eat just yet. You sit up on the cot and immediately regret it. Your back protests. Your legs are stiff from sleeping in a fetal position, which was necessary to avoid the corner where something furry moved during the night. You stretch. Something cracks. Might have been your spine. Could have been the floor. Outside your door, the hallway buzzes with low chatter, footsteps, and the scrape of metal pots. Someone starts coughing violently 2 rooms over. A cough that sounds like it comes from deep inside their soul. It keeps going and going. You begin to wonder if you should applaud when it stops. But it doesn't stop. That's just the background music now. You make your way downstairs. The steps sag and shift like they're held together by ghost spit and pessimism. In the entryway, a girl no older than 7 is hawking buttons she clearly tore off someone's coat. 2 for a penny. 3 if you're handsome, she sings. No one buys. She shrugs like she's been disappointed by humanity for years already. Time to find a place to live that isn't a rent-by-the-hour coffin. You heard someone mention a room, up on 3rd. Cheaper, worse. But at least the floorboards won't collapse if someone sneezes too hard. So you walk. The streets are already alive. Alive is a strong word. They're moving, stinking, shouting. You pass rows of buildings that look like they were punched into place by a drunk architect. Laundry hangs like surrender flags between them, and underfoot the cobblestones are slick with last night's filth. You dodge a puddle and fail. Your boot sinks into something that squelches. Let's pretend it was soup. A horse passes by, dragging a wagon full of broken furniture. Its driver looks like he hasn't blinked in a week. A tenement at the corner of 3rd and Avenue B catches your eye. There's a room to let sign in the window, painted in a hopeful blue that's long since peeled into despair. You knock. A tall, wiry woman answers. Her hair is tied back with a rag. Her face is stone. Got a nickel? She asks. No, you say. She stares. Got strong arms? You nod. She steps aside. Welcome to your new home. It's a 4th floor walk-up. The stairs are vertical, like rope ladder steep. When you finally reach your new room, it's slightly larger than the last one and somehow smells worse. There's a window. It's painted shut. A shared outhouse is down the hall and has seen things that no toilet should ever see. But, miracle of miracles, there's a straw-stuffed mattress on the floor, a chair and a candle stub. You flop down and laugh. You're not sure if it's joy or hysteria. Probably both. Let's talk historical reality for a second. By the mid-1800s, New York was exploding with people, and most of them had nowhere to go. Tenement buildings like this one were tossed up fast and cheap. Developers would buy up row houses and gut them, converting every square foot into rooms barely large enough to sit down in. Ventilation, optional. Plumbing, ha ha ha. Entire families lived in spaces meant for a single person, and rents were still absurd. If you couldn't pay, you didn't get evicted. You just got stared at until you left, or someone bigger made you leave. And here's a bonus. Most landlords didn't live anywhere near their properties. They were off in uptown mansions, sipping wine and complaining about the smell of the lower classes. You've never wanted to kick someone so badly in lace-up boots? Quirky fact. Some landlords charged rent not just by the room, but by the square foot. You could literally rent space under someone's bed. If you could curl into a ball like a depressed hedgehog, you had a home. Now, about rent. The lady downstairs, her name is Mrs. Dooley. You learn this as she hauls you back down to help with her laundry. It's your unofficial rent until you can pay. Her husband died, falling out a window during a spirited disagreement, and now she rents rooms to unfortunates like you. She tells you that, and then hands you a bucket. Water, she says, from the pump. Don't dawdle, you dawdle. Not on purpose. The pump is 5 blocks away and there's a line. Everyone's got a bucket. Everyone's cranky. A boy punches another boy over who was first. A woman swings a broom with shocking precision. You wait. The pump wheezes like an old smoker. When it finally fills your bucket, the water looks clearish. You don't trust it. Fun fact, you shouldn't. New York's water supply in the 1800s was a mess. The Croton Aqueduct won't be completed for a few more years, so most people rely on groundwater pumps or private wells, many of which are next to cemeteries, sewers, or worse. Cholera outbreaks are common, and if you're not boiling your water, you're not. You're just inviting disease into your bowels like a very bad Airbnb guest. By the time you get back, the bucket's spilled a bit, and your hands are red from the cold. Mrs. Dooley nods without smiling. She lets you use the last spoon of her tea leaves. You'll be working tomorrow, she says. I know a man. That night, as you sit by your candle stub, sipping hot water flavoured faintly like dirt and regret, you realise this is survivable. Barely. And honestly, that's a win. Here's the scholarly debate of the day. Some historians argue that these slum tenements were hotbeds of community, where people of different cultures shared stories, helped each other, and built tight bonds. Others point out that when 25 people live in one building and there's one toilet, bonds fray faster than a cheap corset. You're leaning toward the latter, but hey, maybe you just haven't found your people yet. You fall asleep to the sound of someone arguing in German, someone else crying in Italian, and a lullaby in Irish floating up from a floor below. The voices weave into each other like threads in a tattered quilt. Ugly, real, still somehow warm. You dream of rats doing your laundry. You wake up smiling. You wake up to a strange silence. That's never a good sign. In the slums, quiet usually means one of 3 things. Someone's died, someone's hiding, or something is about to explode, emotionally, physically, or gastrointestinally. You sit up and listen. No shouting, no clanging pans, no coughing fits, just the dull creak of an old building holding its breath. You get to your feet, stretch out your limbs, and debate whether today's the day you finally find honest work, or just follow a cart full of bread until someone leaves it unattended. Downstairs, Mrs. Dooley is already half into your business before you even say good morning. She's holding a bundle of rags and barking orders at someone too small to argue. She points at you like you're a mop. You're going to the docks. Ask for Mr. Bingham. He's always looking for strong backs and weak minds. You don't take it personally. You grab your coat and go, bracing for the worst, and the city obliges. Outside, the air is thick and soupy, like someone tried to boil a fishmonger's stall and forgot to open a window. The stench hits you like a slap with a wet newspaper. The street is glistening, not from rain, but from the oozing mystery fluids that seem to leak out of New York itself. You step around a dead cat and 2 children haggling over a wooden spoon. Welcome to your daily commute. You head south toward the waterfront. As you get closer, the noise builds. Hammers clanging, wheels squeaking, men shouting in 17 dialects, and a persistent lowing from cattle being unloaded at the piers. The East River shimmers like a greasy mirror under a sky that can't decide whether it wants to rain or just oppress you with humidity. You find Mr. Bingham exactly where Mrs. Dooley said he'd be, on Pier 13, shouting at 2 dockhands while balancing on a stack of barrels like an angry gargoyle. He sees you and waves you over without breaking stride. You breathing? He asks. Do you nod? Good enough. You're hired, and just like that you're a dock worker. Your job? Moving heavy things from one place to another while not dying in the process. Barrels of fish, sacks of flour, boxes of nails, and sometimes crates labelled only with vague warnings like danger or private, do not tilt. You don't ask questions, you just lift, haul, stack and sweat. It's honest work, technically, but also a slow-motion method of destroying your spine. Your hands are soon blistered, your shoulders ache, and your lower back starts composing angry letters to your brain. You're paid at the end of the shift with 2 coins and a half loaf of questionable bread. Still, it's more than most people get. Historical fact time. In the 1800s, New York's docks were lifelines for commerce and nightmares for workers. Most of the labour was casual, meaning you'd show up in the morning, hope someone needed help, and if you were lucky, work until your limbs gave out. There were no unions yet, no protections. Injuries were common, deaths weren't unusual. You were disposable, and you knew it. By midday, the sun is high and the smell is worse. The docks reek of salt water, old blood, rotting fish, and something you can only describe as regret stew. a fellow dock worker named Amos, a giant of a man with only 3 fingers on one hand, offers you a sip from his canteen. You accept, then nearly spit it out. It's not water, it's potato gin, and it burns like betrayal. "First drink's free," Amos says, grinning with the teeth he has left. "Second one's for the pain." You cough politely and decline a second round. You're not sure if drinking while hauling 100-pound crates is a good idea, but judging by your co-workers, it's also the local version of a health plan. Quirky fact of the day, those mysterious crates you're hauling. Some of them might contain more than fish or nails. It wasn't unusual in this era for smugglers to sneak in exotic animals, fake medicines, or even human remains for medical schools. One legend says a taxidermied giraffe once arrived on the docks and terrified half the east side. No one ever claimed it. By late afternoon, you're dizzy with exhaustion. You eat your bread sitting on a barrel, watching the skyline shimmer through the heat. New York is alive, but not in a friendly way. It snarls and shifts and waits to see if you'll crack. Nearby, a group of children are fishing through garbage bins, laughing and throwing apple cores at rats. A boy about 10 shouts to his friend, "Found a nickel! Smells like pee!" He pockets it anyway. You're starting to understand the rhythms of this place. It doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if you're scared. It only cares if you keep moving. And if you don't, it moves over you. Now, a moment for an open debate. Some historians argue that the booming dock industries helped lift immigrant workers into stability, that the jobs, brutal as they were, allowed people to send money home, save up, and eventually move out of the slums. Others point out that for every family who made it out, 10 more were crushed beneath the weight of low pay, injury, and endless competition. You're leaning toward the crushed side of the scale today. The shift ends with a bell, and Mr. Bingham tosses you your coins with a grunt. He doesn't say thank you, he barely looks at you. You pocket the money, your hands shaking, and start the long walk back to 3rd Avenue. You pass saloons full of men drinking away their wages, women sitting on stoops brushing lice from their children's hair, and a preacher on a corner screaming about eternal damnation while a pickpocket quietly lifts his wallet. When you get back to your tenement, Mrs. Dooley is stirring something in a pot that might be soup, might be glue, and might be an experiment. She gives you a nod. You think it might be approval. She offers you a bowl. You eat it. You try not to identify the ingredients. Then you collapse into your straw mattress, every muscle aching. You've made it through your first day of labour in 1800s Manhattan, and you're only mostly broken. Outside your window, the city buzzes. A harmonica plays somewhere far off. A couple argues in Polish beneath your building. A cat screams. Maybe Edgar. You're not sure if he's winning or losing. You smile because despite it all you earned something today. It's not hope exactly, but it's close enough. The water's going to kill you. You just don't know it yet. You wake up with your mouth dry and your stomach making noises like it's considering mutiny. Your whole body feels like it spent the night wrestling a sack of bricks and lost. You shuffle down the hall, splash your face with water from the communal basin, and immediately regret it. The water's got a taste, not a flavour, a taste. Like something sour that's also somehow burnt and metallic. Still, it's wet. You splash again. By the time you make it down to the street, there's a crowd gathered around the pump. It's barely dawn, and already people are shouting about line cutting, dirty buckets, and whose turn it is. You step up with your tin pail, the handle biting into your raw fingers. The pump groans as you crank it, and the water that sloshes out looks suspicious, slightly cloudy, floating with the occasional mystery fleck. You blink. Was that a worm? Nope. Just a hair. You hope. You carry it back, careful not to spill, because water like this isn't just precious, it's dangerous. Here's your fun historical fact for the day. By the early 1800s, most of Manhattan's wells and pumps were contaminated. You had cemeteries leaching into groundwater, animal waste seeping from slaughterhouses, and people dumping chamber pots wherever they felt inspired. There were no proper sewer systems yet. Some parts of the city relied on wooden pipes, wooden, like trees with holes in them, running under the ground, slowly rotting alongside your dreams. And as the population exploded, water sources got even filthier. But hey, as long as it's wet and doesn't catch fire, it counts, right? The city won't finish building the Croton Aqueduct until the 1840s, and even then, it doesn't reach everyone, especially not you. You settle back inside with your sludgy pail, boiling what you can over a tiny flame. The pot hisses and steams, and your room fills with a damp heat that smells vaguely like cabbage and feet. You sip cautiously. It burns your tongue, but it's drinkable. Probably. You've already got a rash on your arm you can't explain. What's one more? Out in the hall, someone starts screaming. Not the angry kind, the panicked kind. You step out, joining a small mob clustering around a girl collapsed on the floor. A red-haired kid, maybe 8, curled up and twitching. Her mother is crying, rocking back and forth. Someone mutters the word cholera. Nobody touches her. No one helps. Instead, they all back away like she's already a corpse. You do too. Not because you want to, but because you're terrified. You've heard the stories. You've seen what it does. Let's pause and talk about the science. Because you're living through one of history's most horrifying disease outbreaks. Cholera hit New York hard in the 19th century, riding in on ships from Europe, spreading through contaminated water like wildfire through dry hay. Within hours of drinking infected water, people could go from healthy to violently ill, vomiting, cramping, diarrhea so intense it dehydrated them to death. The newspapers called it the Blue Death, because victims turned bluish from lack of oxygen before they died. The worst part? Nobody really knew what caused it. Some blamed the air, the weather, or bad humours. The idea that maybe drinking sewer broth was the culprit hadn't caught on yet. That's your quirky fact. People literally thought cholera came from smelling bad things. Miasma theory, they called it. So the solution wasn't to clean the water. It was to burn incense, sprinkle vinegar, or carry around little scented handkerchiefs like you were trying to ward off ghosts. Spoiler, none of that worked. You spend the rest of the day watching the building whisper and shift around the sick girl. Her mother screams for help. Nobody answers. A few tenants slip out and don't return. You stay, but you wedge a cloth under your door and boil more water just in case. You've got nowhere to go. You might as well go down swinging. By evening, the girl's dead. Someone, probably Mrs. Dooley, calls in the coroner, and the city cart arrives to collect the body. You peek out the window as they wrap her in stained linen and load her onto the cart, tucked beside 2 others already waiting. The cart creaks down the cobblestones, vanishing into the fog. You sit back on your mattress, numb. It's not the first dead person you've seen here. It won't be the last. But this one lived down the hall. She waved to you once when you were hauling in coal. She had freckles. She wore her brother's shoes. You look at your pail of water, still half full, still probably teeming with things that want to eat you from the inside out. That night the city feels quieter than usual. Not peaceful, just hushed, like it's holding its breath again. You can't sleep, so you walk. Just a short block around the tenement. The night air is thick, smelling like coal smoke and river rot, but it's better than the cloying silence inside. You pass a group of men playing dice in an alley, their eyes flicking to you and then away. No one says a word. Then you reach the pump again. Same pump, same bucket crank. You're not here to draw water, though. You just stand there, staring, at the wet, stained base, at the drain that smells faintly of iron, at the spout that's claimed more lives than a battlefield. You feel anger rise, not fear, rage. Because this isn't a storm, it's not a plague from the heavens, it's not divine punishment, it's filth, it's infrastructure, it's neglect, it's people who don't care if you live or die. Here's your scholarly debate. Was cholera the failure of science or the failure of compassion? Some argue the medical community simply didn't know better, that germ theory hadn't taken root yet. Others say the upper classes, safe in their clean-uptown mansions, turned their backs on the slums, letting people die rather than admit the system was broken. You don't have an answer. You just know a kid died today. And she didn't have to. You trudge back home, past dim windows and crooked stoops, and climb the steps to your room. You bolt the door, drink one last scalding cup of boiled water, and collapse onto your mattress. Tomorrow you'll need to find cleaner water, maybe further uptown, maybe from a shop that sells it in jugs. It'll cost money. It always does. You roll over, listening to your heartbeat echo in the quiet. You're still alive, still breathing, still boiling your water like it's a daily ritual to ward off death. And it kind of is. You're starving. Like not just I skipped lunch hungry. This is full body, deep bone, gnaw on your own knuckles desperation. Your stomach feels like it's caving in on itself, forming a tiny black hole that's slowly devouring your will to live. You stretch out on the straw mattress trying to ignore the ache, but even the rats aren't bothering you anymore. That's how you know it's bad. Edgar usually drops by to sniff your socks or steal a crumb. But not today. There are no crumbs to steal. Mrs. Dooley's stew pot is empty, and she's been giving you that look. You know the one. The I like you kid, but I'm not feeding a grown person out of my widow rations look. Which is fair, sort of. But also, you might start chewing her floorboards if this keeps up. So, you need food, time to get creative. You check your coat pocket and find 2 coins. Barely enough for a stale roll and a bruised apple, assuming you can beat the morning rush at the corner market. But the lines are long, the sellers are grumpy, and prices have gone up because someone stole a wagon of flour last week. That someone might have been Mrs. Dooley's cousin. She's not saying. The first stall you visit smells promising, yeasty, warm, and a little burnt. The bread guy is selling half loaves for a penny. You step up, offer a coin, and he slaps a crust into your hand like he's throwing a rock. It's hard enough to kill a pigeon. You thank him anyway. At the second stall you squint at the fruit. Everything's vaguely sticky. The apples have soft spots. The pears look like they've seen things. You grab the least revolting one and move on. Back on your stoop you rip off a chunk of bread and sink your teeth in. It tastes acceptable. Slightly sour. Crunchy in a way that bread shouldn't be. You pause. Is that a bug? Yes. Yes, it is. You pick it out, toss it, and keep eating. Bugs are just extra protein. And honestly, it's the most satisfying meal you've had all week. Historical fact. By the 1800s, New York's poor were used to stretching every crumb. Bread was often adulterated, meaning it contained whatever filler was cheapest. Chalk, sawdust, mashed beans, or old flour scraped from bakery floors. Milk was sometimes thinned with water or even tinted with plaster to make it look fresh. And meat? Don't even ask. If it didn't bite you first, it was considered edible. There were no food safety laws yet. No inspections. If a vendor sold you spoiled fish or mouldy potatoes, that was your problem. It was capitalism at its most raw and rotting. You decide to wander deeper into the market district, chasing the scents of fried onions and spiced sausages. Someone's cooking something over an open barrel fire, and your stomach does a backflip. You edge closer. A man in a soot-streaked apron is flipping patties on a flat slab of metal. The smell is glorious. You ask what it is. Meat pie, he says. You ask what kind of meat. He just laughs. You buy it anyway. It's hot, greasy, and wrapped in yesterday's newsprint. You burn your tongue on the first bite, but it's worth it. Even if the meat is suspiciously chewy and possibly pigeon, or rat. You don't ask. You just chew and pretend it's chicken. Quirky fact of the day, there were restaurants for the poor in the 1800s, but they weren't what you'd expect. Soup kitchens existed, mostly run by churches or reform groups, and they handed out relief tickets for stew or bread. But they made you earn it. You'd have to listen to a sermon or promise to stay sober, which was a tall order in neighbourhoods where whiskey was cheaper than clean water. Other places, like coffee houses, offered bread, beans and coffee for a few pennies, but the vibe was halfway between library and prison. As you lick the grease from your fingers, you feel a little more human, or at least less like a walking skeleton. You lean back against a post, watching the market flow, women in patched shawls haggling over potatoes, kids stealing apples and sprinting away, old men nodding off beside baskets of wilted greens. You think about the people who live just a few blocks uptown, people eating roast duck and oysters in crystal-lit dining rooms. They have servants, silver forks, and dining etiquette manuals. Meanwhile, you're making a game out of which bugs are the crunchiest. Here's your scholarly debate. Some historians say that despite the hardship, street food culture in 1800s, New York was vibrant and diverse, offering cheap, flavourful meals to the working class and immigrants. Others argue it was just another symptom of inequality, with people forced to risk their health because they couldn't afford anything better. You, personally, would love a proper dinner that doesn't twitch. As the afternoon heat builds, you wander toward a quieter street. A bakery window catches your eye, not because of the bread, but because of the flies. They're swirling in a slow, dizzy dance over a pie crust that's clearly been there too long. You move on. Your last stop is a pickle cart. Yes, a pickle cart. The vendor is an elderly woman with no teeth and a huge barrel. She sees you eyeing it and grins. 3 pickles for a cent, love, she says. Or 6 if you don't mind the mushy ones. You nod. You don't mind. You can't afford to mind. You get 6, wrap them in paper, and eat 2 on the walk home. They're vinegary, cold, and maybe a little fermented, but surprisingly delicious. You feel like a king. A very sticky, mildly nauseated king. When you get back to your building, a few kids are playing with a hoop and stick in the street, dodging carriages and shouting things that would have made your grandmother faint. You step over a puddle Avoid a pile of fish guts and climb back to your room. Inside, the light's fading. Your belly's half full, which is a luxury. You stretch out on the mattress and think about what you'd eat if you had real money. Roast beef, potatoes, pie, with fruit in it. Not bugs, maybe cheese, a soft loaf of bread that doesn't double as a weapon. Your stomach grumbles again. One more pickle then. Let's talk about jobs, the kind that eat your soul and snap your spine, but at least let you afford bug bread and vinegar pickles. Because today you're going to work. Not like the dock haul you did before, where your job was to lift stuff until your arms forgot how to be arms. This time, Mrs. Dooley sent you across town with a name and an address. Mr. Josiah McBroom, factory foreman, 7th and Cherry. She says he always needs bodies. Doesn't say alive or dead, which is worrying, but hey, you've got rent to think about. The walk takes over an hour, even though it's not far. The streets are clogged with delivery wagons, stray dogs, street preachers, and human walls of sweaty labourers moving slower than molasses in a snowstorm. A carriage nearly runs over your foot and the driver yells at you. Classic. Eventually you reach the place. The air changes before you even get to the door. It's sharp, oily, hot. The building looks like a brick fortress, with belching smokestacks that make the sky look perpetually offended. You enter. The air inside is worse. You're immediately hit with heat, noise, and the smell of, is that grease? Number, burned fabric, soot, definitely sweat. Maybe all of the above. A man with a walrus moustache and suspenders appears. You McBroom? You ask. He snorts. No, I own McBroom. You work for me? Cool. You nod. He doesn't ask for your name, age, or experience. Just points to a row of people hunched over machines. Pick a table. Try not to lose a finger. Welcome to the textile industry. Your job? Feeding cloth into an industrial sewing machine that looks like it was built by a drunk inventor who hated humans. It's loud, fast, hungry, and it doesn't care about your learning curve. The woman next to you, missing 2 fingers and an eyebrow, gives you a look that says don't talk to me unless you want the same haircut. You get to work. Within 10 minutes, you've jammed the machine once, stabbed your thumb and accidentally fed it your shirt hem. You're sweating through your clothes. Your hands are slick. Your eyes are watering from the fabric dust and your back feels like it's been put in a vice. Fun fact, by the mid-1800s, garment factories were everywhere in New York. Most were small sweatshops operating out of cramped tenements or old warehouses. Workers, mostly women and children, were paid by the piece, not by the hour. That meant speed was everything. If you were slow, you starved. If you were sloppy, you got fired. If you complained, you found yourself out on the street before lunch. You don't eat lunch, by the way. There's a 10-minute break where someone hands you a cold biscuit and a cup of something that might be coffee, but tastes like regret and burnt shoes. You eat it anyway. Then it's back to the machine. All around you, the room roars. Machines clack and hiss. People shout to be heard over the noise, but mostly they don't bother. You fall into the rhythm of it. Feed the cloth, press the pedal, keep the line straight, don't look up, don't stop. 8 hours pass, then 9, 10. At the end of the shift, your eyes are twitching. Your back is locked in a question mark. Your fingers are numb. Mr. McBroom appears, counts out a few coins and drops them into your hand like you're a vending machine he's disappointed in. You're back tomorrow, he asks. You want to say no. You want to say absolutely not. Please throw me into the river. But instead you nod, because you need those coins. On your way out, you pass a girl with her arm wrapped in a bloody rag. She's maybe 12. She looks at you with a hollow stare like she's already decades older. You nod. She doesn't nod back. Quirky fact of the day. Factory accidents were so common, they didn't even make the paper. Fingers, hands, even entire arms could get pulled into gears or crushed under belts. First aid? Not a thing. You bled on your apron, cursed quietly and kept working. You step outside and the air feels fresh, even though it smells like dead fish and soot. You stretch your arms and feel your spine crackle like firewood. Walking home takes twice as long. You pass other workers dragging their feet. Some go into bars, some go into churches, some just sit down on the curb and stare at nothing. You buy a piece of stale cake from a pushcart vendor because your body's screaming for sugar. It tastes like sawdust dipped in molasses. You eat every crumb. Back at the tenement, Mrs. Dooley sees you dragging your body through the door and just hands you a cloth. You look like a rug someone forgot to beat. You don't argue. You wash your face, sit in your chair and stare out the window. Across the street, another factory is still lit up. A second shift, maybe, or just people working overtime. You think about your machine, about the noise, about the girl with the bandaged arm, and you wonder how many people are missing parts of themselves just to keep breathing in this city. Here's the scholarly debate of the night. Some historians argue that these early factories, despite the suffering, laid the groundwork for economic mobility, for organised labour, for progress. Others say they were exploitative death traps, profiting off desperation and child labour. You're living it now, and you're not sure progress is worth a thumb. You fall asleep with your hands still curled like they're feeding fabric. You dream of needles chasing you down dark alleys. You wake up already sore, and you know you'll do it again tomorrow. You need to forget, just for a night. After 3 straight days of feeding that demonic sewing machine and somehow keeping all your fingers, you're not just tired, you're hollow. Your spine's been replaced with a rusty metal rod. Your fingers twitch in your sleep, and your dreams are a loop of thread snapping and Mr. McBroom yelling the word incompetent like it's your name. Mrs. Dooley sees you dragging yourself in and doesn't say a word, just pushes a chipped mug into your hand and nods toward the street. 5 points tonight, she says. Go see how the other half sins. You take a sip. It's not tea, it's not soup. You're not sure what it is, but it's strong and it burns all the way down. You nod and leave before she changes her mind and makes you haul laundry again. You've heard about 5 points. Everyone has. It's got a reputation like a raccoon with a knife. Filthy, unpredictable, and way too comfortable in the dark. The walk down Baxter Street starts normal enough, but by the time you hit Mulberry, you can feel the change. The air thickens. It smells like smoke, whiskey, sweat, and things that should have been buried a week ago. Music leaks from every direction. Violins, pianos, fiddles, drums, and voices yelling off-key. It's like stepping into a fever dream built from broken bottles and bad decisions. The streets are alive. Not just moving, pulsing. People of every shape, colour and accent crowd the cobblestones. Street performers dance in ragged boots. A man juggles fire beside a preacher screaming about sin. Kids dodge between legs, lifting wallets like ghosts in tiny boots. You push into a saloon called the Bucket of Blood. A charming name for a place that promises violence before you even get through the door. Inside, it's chaos. Tables packed with shouting men, women balancing drinks on their heads, someone playing a fiddle so fast it sounds like it's crying. You squeeze into a corner clutching your mug. A girl with a black eye and a grin hands you a plate of something that might be meat and might be punishment. You eat it anyway. It's warm and salty and probably not rat. Here's your historical fact. 5 Points was the epicenter of New York's 19th century chaos. A 5-street intersection where Irish, black, Chinese and Italian immigrants all packed into the same crumbling tenements. The rich called it a breeding ground for crime, but down here it was also a rare place of diversity and strange chaotic community. Sure, it had murders and brothels, but also dancing, music and life in all its gritty forms. A man jumps onto a table. He's shirtless, missing several teeth, and has the energy of a raccoon on espresso. "Waltz time," he yells. And just like that, the tables are pushed aside and the floor turns into a dance hall. You get pulled into it by someone with wild eyes and too much energy. Suddenly you're spinning, stomping, and trying not to get kicked in the shins by enthusiastic strangers. You're not a good dancer, but it doesn't matter. No one here is. That's the beauty of 5 Points. You can be awful and sweaty and screaming the wrong lyrics, and nobody cares. Quirky fact of the night. The 5 Points dancers were infamous. Poor kids, sometimes drunk or just high on sugar, would perform elaborate tap routines for tourists and locals alike. Their moves eventually influenced early American tap and jazz dance. So yes, some of modern Broadway was born right here, in a beer-soaked saloon with broken floorboards. You catch your breath near a window, your shirt sticking to your back. A man beside you lights a pipe and offers you a puff. You take it. It smells like burnt licorice and possibly regret. You cough violently. He laughs like it's the funniest thing he's seen all week. "First time?" he asks. "At 5 Points or slowly poisoning myself?" you wheeze. He grins and claps you on the back. "Both." You step back outside eventually, drawn by music from another block. This time it's a group of black musicians playing fiddle and banjo, a small crowd clapping in time. A woman pulls you into a circle and teaches you a step you've never seen before. Your feet follow. Your body remembers joy, briefly. It's not clean, it's not safe, but it feels like life. Raw, loud, unapologetic. Here's the scholarly debate for the evening. Was 5 Points a den of sin or a cultural melting pot? Some say it was where crime flourished unchecked. Gangs, brothels, violence on every corner. Others argue it was one of the first integrated communities in America, where oppressed people found solidarity and expression. The truth is probably both. You wander through the neighbourhood, passing people dancing, sleeping, selling, stealing. A man offers to sell you a chicken. You don't ask if it's his. Down one alley, you spot a group of kids drawing in chalk on the bricks, writing dirty poems and laughing like it's the greatest art in the world. One of them turns and asks, "Want to buy a drawing?" You give him a penny, and he hands you a sketch of a man with a top hat and no pants. Masterpiece. At some point the night blurs. You end up in another bar, then a brothel that doubles as a gambling den. You don't gamble. You don't do anything. You just sit, sip something brown, and listen to a piano player who hits more wrong notes than right ones, but plays with soul. The world outside eventually starts to fade. The crowds thin. The music drifts off. Somewhere a woman sings in a language you don't know, and it sounds like a lullaby for drunk ghosts. You stagger home through puddles that might be water and might be blood. Hard to tell. Your shoes are soaked. Your head buzzes. But for the first time in days, you feel awake. Tomorrow you'll be sore. Your job will still suck. The bugs will still outnumber the people in your room. But tonight, you are human. Tonight you danced. It's summer now, and not the fun, let's go swim in a lake and roast corn kind of summer. Number. This is 1800s New York City summer. The air is thick enough to chew, the cobblestones are sweating, and the tenement smells like someone boiled garbage in cabbage water and then let it sit out for a few weeks just to see what would happen. You wake up drenched. Not just a light sheen of sweat, but full soggy shirt, pillow stuck to your face. Did I just run a marathon in my sleep levels of damp? Even Edgar the rat has vacated the premises. You spot him perched on the fire escape outside, fanning himself with a leaf like a tiny aristocrat who knows when to leave a bad party. The first breath you take feels like someone just handed you a damp wool sock and told you to inhale through that. You sit up and nearly black out. The room spins. You chug your leftover boiled water like it's champagne. It tastes like lukewarm feet. Downstairs, Mrs. Dooley's fanning herself with a book and sweating like a politician on trial. "Don't you be dying today," she says without looking up. "Too hot to dig a grave." You nod, too exhausted to form words. Your shirt's already sticking to your back. It's not even 7 a.m. Outside, it's worse. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the streets already radiate heat. The buildings trap it, magnify it, and throw it back in your face like the city's got a grudge. The stink is incredible. A putrid blend of horse dung, fish guts, sewer gas, and everyone's unwashed everything. Even the flies look tired. You pass a man on the corner selling what he claims is ice. It's not. It's a melting grey cube that used to be ice, now sitting in a puddle of regret. He's still charging a penny for a handful. A woman hands it to her toddler like it's gold. The kid sticks it straight in his mouth. Here's your historical fact. Before modern refrigeration, ice was a luxury, and a seasonal one at that. Most of it was shipped down from northern lakes, stored in massive ice houses packed with sawdust, and sold by the chunk. But when summer really hit, the ice rotted or melted. The poor? They didn't get much of it anyway. That cold drink you dream of? Not happening. Now imagine this heat trapped in a 6-story tenement with no ventilation, no plumbing, and no fans. The rooms are ovens, the walls sweat, the mattresses ferment. It's a slow-cook death simulator. Back in your sweatshop job, things somehow get worse. The factory is like a blast furnace. The windows are painted shut because management doesn't want distractions, and the machines radiate heat like miniature demons. You and the other workers start the day half dehydrated and finish the shift looking like steamed vegetables. A kid passes out beside his machine, and nobody even reacts. The foreman just drags him to a corner and throws a wet rag on his face like he's seasoning meat. You start fantasizing about jumping into the East River just to cool off. Then you remember, the East River is basically a soup of dead fish, floating trash, and industrial runoff. But hey, at least it's wet. Quirky fact, there was an actual ice famine in New York in the 1850s. A warm winter led to poor ice harvests, and the whole city went into meltdown mode, literally. Meat spoiled, milk curdled, and tempers exploded. The rich stockpiled what they could. The poor made do with hot beer and open windows. It didn't go well. After your shift, you stumble outside, dizzy and reeking like boiled socks. You find a street vendor selling lemonade. Well, a lemon-flavoured drink that probably contains 0 actual lemon. You buy a tin cup for 2 cents. It's warm. You drink it anyway. That evening the sun finally dips, but the heat doesn't. The tenement walls are still holding on to it, radiating misery like they've got something to prove. You sit on the fire escape, shirtless, fanning yourself with a piece of newspaper. Across the alley, a woman dumps a bucket of water over her head. Everyone cheers. Some tenants sleep on the roof. Some sleep in stairwells or out on the fire escapes. You try the roof, but it's crowded, noisy, and one guy keeps mumbling in his sleep about pickles. So you return to your room and lie there, arms splayed, praying for a breeze. It never comes. Here's the scholarly debate. Was summer in the 1800s more deadly than winter for the poor? Some argue yes. Heat waves, disease, spoiled food, and dehydration all took brutal tolls. Others point to winter's hypothermia, lack of fuel, and higher death rates. The truth is, both seasons were equal opportunity murderers, just wearing different hats. You don't sleep much. You drift in and out, hallucinating about cold water and shaded porches. At one point you dream that someone gives you a glass of ice. You cry. In the middle of the night, a thunderstorm rolls in. Lightning flashes against the brick walls. You bolt upright and crawl out to the fire escape just in time to feel the rain hit your face. It's glorious. The whole street erupts. Kids running barefoot in the puddles, women laughing on balconies, men shirtless and howling like wolves. It's pure chaotic joy. For 10 brief minutes the world cools, and then the rain stops, the humidity triples, and the mosquitoes return with a vengeance. You drag yourself back inside, already bitten, already damp again. But you're smiling, just a little, because tonight you almost remembered what it felt like to be cool. The first thing you see is fire, not a little candle flame or a stovetop mishap, real fire. Rolling smoke, orange light licking at the sky. You wake to the sound of shouting in the street, followed by the unmistakable crackle of something very large, very wooden, and very flammable giving up the ghost. You bolt upright, eyes burning, lungs catching on the smoke already seeping through your cracked window. "Fire!" someone bellows from below. "Get out! Building's gonna go!" You don't wait. You throw on your boots, still damp from the previous day, grab your coat. Why? Instinct. And shove open the door to the hallway, which is now full of smoke and panicked neighbours. Someone's crying. Someone else is screaming about their cat. The floor is shaking beneath your feet like the building itself knows it's done for. Mrs. Dooley's voice cuts through it all. "Down the stairs, not the fire escape. Fire's on the west side." You obey, ducking low, cloth over your mouth like you're trying to survive a gas attack, which honestly you kind of are. The staircase groans as feet thunder over it. You keep your head down and move fast, hand dragging the wall to stay upright. Around you, people shout in English, Irish, Yiddish, German. Fear is a universal language. A baby shrieks, someone pushes, you nearly fall. Finally, the front door, daylight, air, chaos. You stumble out into the street just as the top floor of the building goes up like a torch. The heat slaps your face. Bricks crack. The crowd gasps. Someone grabs your arm. It's Dooley, her face black with soot, eyes wide. "You're alive," she says like she can't quite believe it. Then she coughs hard enough to bend over. Firefighters arrive late and mostly unprepared. The engine is horse-drawn, the hoses are leaky, and they have to pump the water manually, like a team of exhausted Victorian bodybuilders. The stream that comes out is barely enough to douse a dog, much less a 4-story inferno. The building next to yours is already smouldering. Tenements packed tight like matchsticks. One catches, the rest follow. The fire spreads with gleeful speed, leaping alleys, chewing wood and cloth and dreams. Historical fact. In 19th century New York, fires were a constant threat. Tenement buildings were built quickly, cheaply, and with all the fire resistance of a bonfire made of newspaper and sadness. Open flames were everywhere. Candles, oil lamps, coal stoves, and firefighting services were fragmented, underfunded, and often corrupt. Entire blocks could go up before help arrived. And it gets better. Insurance scams were common. Some landlords would intentionally let their buildings burn if they were behind on taxes, or worse, if they wanted to rebuild for higher-class tenants. So if you're thinking this feels suspiciously well-timed, you're not alone. Quirky fact of the day. Firefighting crews in early New York were sometimes more focused on fighting each other than the actual fires. Rival companies would race to fires, and whoever got there first claimed the insurance bonus. If two crews arrived at the same time, fist fight. Sometimes while the fire raged behind them, you stand in the street for hours watching everything you own turn into smoke. Mrs. Dooley sits on the curb, muttering prayers in a language you don't speak. A girl cries softly beside a broken doll. Edgar, if he made it out, is gone. Eventually the fire burns itself out, but the damage is done. Your home is gone. Here's the aftermath. You have the clothes on your back, a coin or two in your pocket, and maybe a slight case of smoke inhalation. And now you're one of hundreds in the neighbourhood with nowhere to go. The city officials arrive, late as always, handing out useless advice and promising nothing. A man in a nice coat takes notes on a clipboard, while a barefoot boy vomits behind him from smoke exposure. That night the survivors are rounded up and herded toward a local schoolhouse turned shelter. You're packed onto the floor with rows of other families, the room reeking of sweat, fear, and ash. It's hot, it's loud, it's better than burning to death, but only just. Here's the scholarly debate for tonight. Was the rise of fire in tenement districts a failure of design or of policy? Some say the buildings were doomed from the start. Bad materials, no ventilation, zero oversight. Others argue the city simply didn't care. The poor weren't worth protecting. The slums could burn as long as the fires didn't cross into the wealthier parts of town. You lie on the floor that night beside a coughing old man and a toddler with a stuffed sock for a toy. You stare at the ceiling and think about your mattress, your little window, even the bucket you kept water in, all gone. You wonder how many people in this room have started over like this. How many will do it again? In the dark, someone starts singing quietly. A lullaby, maybe, or a hymn. You close your eyes and listen. There's soot in your ears, smoke in your lungs, and somehow you're still breathing. The city doesn't slow down just because your life caught fire. You wake on the floor of the makeshift shelter, wrapped in someone else's blanket, the air thick with stale breath and mouldy hay. The sun is already up and pouring through high, dusty windows, slicing the room into gold-lit misery. Kids are crying. Someone snoring through a cough that sounds weaponized. You sit up, back aching, mouth dry, and brain foggy from sleeping next to 40 other people who snore, shift, and apparently dream scream through the night. You miss your mattress. Yes, the straw-filled lumpy disaster that probably had fleas. At least it was yours. Mrs. Dooley is already awake, chewing a piece of bread so dry it crumbles like chalk. She hands you half without speaking. That's how you know she's still rattled. She hasn't insulted you once this morning. After breakfast, if you can call chewing the same bite for 5 minutes breakfast, you step out into the street to figure out what the rest of your life is supposed to look like. And that's when you see them. The police. Not here to help, not here to rebuild, just standing, watching. In their ill-fitting blue coats and odd little stovepipe hats, they look more like stage actors pretending to be cops than actual law enforcement. Except the batons on their belts are very real, and so are the looks in their eyes. You keep your head down. Historical fact time. The NYPD was officially formed in 1845, modelled after London's Metropolitan Police. But this early version of the force was less to protect and serve, and more to intimidate and collect bribes. Cops were underpaid, poorly trained, and often hired based on political loyalty rather than skill or moral compass. If you were poor, immigrant, or just in the wrong place at the wrong time, the cops didn't help you. They watched you, and occasionally roughed you up for fun. A police officer stomps past you, swinging his baton like a warning. Across the street, a small group of children scatter like pigeons. You hear one mutter, "Coppers out for blood today," and you get moving. You wander toward Mulberry Street, where you heard there's a temporary hiring stand for clean-up crews. The city always needs people to sweep up after disasters they don't prevent. Maybe you can get paid to shovel what used to be your home, but you never make it. Around the corner, a scuffle breaks out. Fast, violent, two men shouting in thick Irish accents, fists flying, and then, crack, a baton, a scream. You freeze. One of the cops is beating a man in the middle of the street, not arresting him, not detaining, just beating him. Hard, mechanical swings like he's chopping wood. The man curls up on the ground, blood soaking through his shirt, and still the officer keeps going. A woman screams. Another cop turns and shouts at the growing crowd, "Disperse! Keep moving!" No one does. because this happens too often. Quirky fact: early NYPD officers were known for their sheer physical dominance. Some precincts even held contests to see who could beat a suspect the fastest. Batons were used liberally, usually on heads. Suspects were sometimes arrested just to be beaten into confessions later, regardless of evidence. You don't know what the man on the ground did. Maybe he stole something. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just looked like someone who would. It doesn't matter. He's bleeding in the gutter now, and the cops are already hauling him off like a sack of potatoes. Here's your scholarly debate. Did the rise of professional policing in New York bring order, or just enforce the status quo? Some historians claim the NYPD cleaned up the city, reduced crime, organised the chaos and brought some sense of law. Others argue the force was never designed to protect you, but to protect property. Specifically, rich people's property. You walk away, fast, heart pounding, hands clenched. Back in 5 points, you pass a small group of young men muttering about the police. You catch the words tweed, bribe, and justice, all laced with venom. You don't stop. You don't want to be part of whatever they're planning. But deep down, you understand. You get back to the shelter and find Mrs. Dooley with a city official, at least someone wearing a coat and looking smug. He's talking fast, waving papers, saying things like temporary relocation, public housing initiative, and a better future. He's lying. You can tell by his shoes. No one with clean shoes has your best interest at heart. He wants to move you and the other survivors to a ward up north. Safer, he says. Cleaner. You know what that means. Further from jobs, further from the few connections you have. A longer walk every day, higher rents, less food. Dooley looks at you. Well, you shake your head. You'll find something else. You're not leaving the only place you halfway understand for some fantasy neighbourhood that smells like progress and false promises. That night, you and a handful of other holdouts sleep outside a half-burned church, curled against the stone walls like stray cats. The priest doesn't kick you out. He doesn't help either. He just nods and locks the door. It's cold. Not the winter kind, but the kind that settles in your bones after a shock. You pull your coat tighter, close your eyes. You still don't know what tomorrow holds, but you're starting to suspect the police won't be on your side when it shows up. You're bored. Which is saying something, because boredom in the slums doesn't usually have time to happen. There's always something to survive. Hunger, heat, rats, your job, actual fires. But today, somehow, the city's paused just long enough for you to feel it. You've spent the morning sitting on a stoop with half a loaf of bread that's gone more rock than food, staring at the street like it might entertain you. A man's selling bootlaces. Another is shouting about soap. Some kids are playing a game that involves a stick, a dead pigeon, and surprisingly accurate cursing. Then you hear it. The high-pitched cry of, "Extra! Extra!" followed by a paper boy zipping down the sidewalk like a bat out of hell, waving the New York Herald over his head like it's dipped in gold. You perk up. Not because you care about headlines. Not really. But because newspapers in this city are better than any theatre you can't afford. They're full of crime, chaos, gossip, politics, and a healthy dose of fiction disguised as news. You dig into your pocket for a coin and flag the boy down. He nearly runs past you, but he sees the glint of copper and snatches it in a blur, tossing a folded paper into your lap like he's throwing shade. You open it up and are immediately hit with big, bold, all-caps drama. Murder on Mulberry. Tammany Hall defends police action. Giant rat stalks east side, maybe demon. You blink. 3 headlines in, and you're already hooked. Let's talk historical fact. In the 19th century, New York's newspapers, especially the so-called penny papers, were sensationalist by design. They sold for a cent a copy, making them affordable for the working class, but they had to fight for attention in a crowded market. So they printed anything. Murders, scandals, ghost sightings, freak weather, made-up interviews, and occasionally actual news. The idea was, if it bleeds, it leads, and if it doesn't bleed, we'll throw some red ink on it and pretend it did. And the people loved it. You lean back and read the front page. The murder story is vague. A notorious gangster allegedly stabbed another notorious gangster during a dispute over unknown matters. That's code for, we have no idea what happened, but blood was involved and someone heard shouting. The paper calls the suspect the Irish Viper, which sounds like a wrestling name, not a criminal. A few pages in, you find a full half column dedicated to a ghost woman, spotted haunting a boarding house in the Bowery. She wears white, sings lullabies, and smells like lavender. You're 98% sure someone just saw a laundry sheet flapping in the wind, but that doesn't stop the writer from including 4 quotes from witnesses who all mysteriously sound like the same guy with a thesaurus. You love every word of it. Quirky fact of the day. Some of these papers had reporters who made things up wholesale. One even claimed the moon was inhabited by bat people. Bat. People. And people bought it. They believed it. Some still do, which just proves, give someone a weird enough story and they'll believe anything. You flip to the back where the editorials are. One's titled The Moral Decline of the Slums, and predictably, blames you for everything from rising crime to low birth weights. The author, who probably lives in a brownstone and has never stepped on a cockroach barefoot in his life, rants about degeneracy, Irish influence, and a complete lack of Christian values. You roll your eyes so hard you almost dislocate something. Here's the scholarly debate. Did the penny press empower the poor by giving them access to literacy and news, or did it just feed them lies and keep them distracted? Some say these papers brought information and identity to the working class. Others argue they were tools of manipulation, stirring up fear and reinforcing stereotypes. You're leaning toward both. Yes, you're reading nonsense, but it's your nonsense. You finish the article with the demon rat, which claims a creature the size of a hog has been seen scuttling down tenement alleys and whispering in tongues. According to the piece, 2 women fainted, and 1 man temporarily lost his voice from sheer fright. You grin, because you know exactly what they saw. Edgar. You pat the side of your boot, where he sometimes perches when he's feeling social. You imagine him reading the article, puffing out his chest and whispering, "Demon rat! At least spell my name right." The rest of the paper is ads, mostly for dubious cures. Hair tonics, miracle pills, spiritual cleanses, and something called Dr. Wexler's Invigorating Syrup, which promises to cure sadness, boils, and marriage-related apathy. Tempting. You fold the paper and tuck it under your coat. Mrs. Dooley might want to read it. She loves the ghost stories, even if she calls them utter tripe and insists ghosts can't read English. That afternoon, as you walk to a side gig hauling trash, you see another paper nailed to a post. It's handwritten, not from a major publisher, just big black letters and cheap ink. Needleworkers wanted, no pay first week, room and board included. Women and girls only. You shake your head. You know exactly what that is. A trap. Some sweatshop disguised as opportunity. And yet, people will go. Because the paper said it's a better life. Because they want to believe. That's the power of ink. It can make you laugh. It can distract you. It can sell you a lie so beautiful you'll chase it right into the fire. You return to the shelter late that evening, paper still folded in your coat pocket. Mrs. Dooley snatches it before you sit down and flips to the editorial, snorting through her nose. "Degeneracy," she mutters. "We should send the editor a box of our laundry water and see how he likes living in it." You lie back, eyes on the ceiling. Your stomach's rumbling again. You've got lint in your pocket. The cops are still crooked. But at least for today you got a good story, even if half of it was probably made up by someone who's never seen a demon rat in their life. You're pretty sure your neighbour is possessed. You didn't start the day with witness an exorcism through a wall on your to-do list, but life in the slums has a funny way of adding colour to your otherwise repetitive routine of sweating, starving, and silently questioning your life choices. It begins around dawn. Not the usual dawn. Roosters crowing, dogs barking, someone in the alley yelling about lost socks. No, this time you're awoken by a guttural voice screaming in Latin. Loud, deep, and extremely not the voice of Mrs. Cabrizi, the 70-year-old Italian widow who lives next door and usually starts her day feeding pigeons and insulting the mailman. Now she's shouting like she's possessed by a Roman general who's very upset about something. You sit up, press your ear to the thin wall and listen. Thumping, moaning, a faint tinkling of broken glass. Someone's chanting a prayer in a loop like a broken record. Then you hear it clearly. "Get thee behind me, Satan." Yep, possession. You throw on your boots and step into the hallway because curiosity greater than self-preservation. A small crowd has gathered near her door. Mrs. Dooley, 2 kids, a man with no shirt and too many teeth, and someone who may or may not be a nun. No one's knocking. They're all just standing there, eyes wide, like this is a front row seat to a penny theatre production. You whisper to Mrs. Dooley, "Is she okay?" She shrugs. Depends who you ask. Her nephew says it's demons. I say it's probably that green gin she bought last week. Either way, she's been talking in dead languages since Tuesday. A woman steps out of the room. She's in full spiritualist get-up, long black dress, tiny hat, gloves, the works. She's holding a tiny bell and what appears to be a clump of herbs that's currently smouldering. "She's responding to the séance," the woman says proudly. "We've made contact." Contact? With what? The devil? Her liver? You don't ask. You just stand there and marvel at how this city manages to find new ways to weird itself out. Let's talk historical fact. Spiritualism was huge in the 1800s, especially after the Civil War, when half the country was grieving and desperate to believe in an afterlife. Seances, spirit photography, table-turning and mediums were all the rage. And it wasn't just rich society ladies. Poor folks got into it too. For some, it was hope. For others, it was a way to make a few bucks off the desperate. In the slums, death is a frequent visitor, and if someone says they can talk to your dead mother for a quarter, you listen. Quirky fact of the day, the Fox sisters, 3 teenage girls from upstate New York, are often credited with sparking the spiritualism craze by claiming they could talk to ghosts through knocking sounds. Decades later, they admitted it was all a hoax. They made the noises by cracking their toe joints. That's right, an entire spiritual movement built on ghostly toe snaps. Back in the hallway, the séance continues. Inside, Mrs. Cabresi screams, "Io sono fuoco eterno," which you think means, "I am eternal fire." You're not fluent, but that's not something you yell during breakfast. The medium rings her bell again, sprinkles more herbs, and announces, "The spirit is resisting. We must appeal to the light." Mrs. Dooley mutters, "You'd resist too if someone lit sage in your curtains." Eventually the chaos dies down. Mrs. Cabresi stops shouting. The medium leaves, dramatically announcing that she has banished the shadow. Her hat falls off as she exits, ruining the vibe. You slip back into your room, equal parts confused and fascinated. You're not religious, but you've seen a lot of unexplainable things lately. Men survive buildings falling on them. Women walk miles barefoot in the snow and show up to work like it's nothing. Kids with typhoid bounce back in 2 days. Maybe it's ghosts. Maybe it's grit. Who's to say? Later that afternoon, you wander into a storefront church that also advertises as a spiritual healing parlour. The man inside is wearing a clerical collar and several rings that look like they came from a pawn shop. He's selling blessed water, anti-curse talismans, and spiritual protection bath powder. You ask what's in the powder. He says, "That's between you and the spirits." You leave. Here's your scholarly debate. Was 19th century spiritualism a genuine religious movement, or just one big con job? Some argue it gave women a rare position of power in a male-dominated world. Most mediums were female, and many made real money doing it. Others say it was pure exploitation, taking advantage of grief, fear, and superstition. Either way, it filled a hole. You walk back home just as the sun's setting over the rooftops, casting long, weird shadows on the alley walls. You spot a child drawing on the bricks with chalk, a stick figure, a cross, and what you swear is a ghost with a top hat. The kid nods at you solemnly like he knows things. You nod back. You don't ask questions. Inside, Mrs. Dooley is making stew and muttering about possession by nonsense. She hands you a bowl. You sit and eat in silence. Then a sudden thump on the ceiling above you, a whisper of movement, the clatter of something falling. "Is that?" You start. She doesn't look up. "If it's a ghost, tell it I'm not interested." You go to bed wondering how much of this city is haunted, and how much of it is just people, cracked and bruised, carrying the weight of things they can't explain. You sleep lightly, not out of fear, just in case someone starts speaking Latin again. The circus is in town. You're not sure if that's a blessing, a distraction, or just a new way for the universe to remind you how weird this city is. Either way, word spreads fast through the slums. Faster than fire, faster than cholera, faster than Mrs. Dooley's gossip about the butcher's wife. By mid-morning, every child within 20 blocks is screaming about elephants and acrobats. Even some of the adults are excited, which in your neighbourhood is about as common as a fresh breeze. You learn the circus is set up down by the Bowery, in a big canvas tent with peeling paint and letters so large they look like they're yelling at you. P.T. Barnum's American Museum and fantastical living curiosities see the fearsome Fedgy mermaid, the astonishing bearded lady, real giants, dwarfs, and the monkey boy of Mexico. You stare at the poster. There's a drawing of a mermaid that looks suspiciously like someone glued a fish to a mummy. Below that, a man with a comically large head is riding a unicycle, while juggling knives and smiling like he knows something you don't. It's horrifying, it's ridiculous, you have to go. You scrounge 2 coins from your coat lining and head toward the tent, getting swept up in the surge of humanity streaming through the streets. Mothers with sticky-faced kids, labourers on their lunch breaks, even a pair of cops who don't seem to be arresting anyone for once. Outside the tent, music blares from a band of men in matching vests who play slightly off-key and entirely too loud. A strong man flexes beside a woman holding a snake longer than your leg. Children stare, mouths open. One faints. You pay your coin at the gate and enter. It's hot inside, the air smells like sawdust, stale peanuts and elephant. And there it is, the main attraction. The centre ring of New York's weirdness. P.T. Barnum's travelling museum of oddities, carefully arranged to delight, disgust and distract. Historical fact time. Barnum's circus in this era wasn't just the big top with acrobats. It was a mix of museum, sideshow, lecture hall and performance stage. Think natural history exhibit meets carnival fever dream. People paid to see pickled fetuses in jars, taxidermy nightmares, and humans displayed as curiosities. Which brings you to the first act, the bearded lady. She's sitting on a small velvet stool surrounded by curious onlookers. Her beard is magnificent, better than any man in the room. She's reading a book and barely glancing at the gawkers. Someone whispers, "Is she real?" like she can't hear. She flips a page and says without looking up, "Realer than your manners." You love her immediately. Next is General Tom Thumb, a performer barely 3 feet tall, decked out in a miniature suit and top hat. He tells jokes, does a little dance, and bows deeply as coins are tossed at his feet. Then comes the Fiji mermaid, and yes, it's exactly what you guessed. A grotesque little creature behind glass. The top half of a monkey, the bottom half of a fish, glued together with nightmare fuel. A sign claims it was found deep beneath the coral tombs of the South Pacific. You're not sure what's worse, that people believe it, or that some don't care if it's fake as long as it's weird. Quirky fact of the day, Barnum knew most of his attractions were fakes. He didn't care. He once famously said, "The public appears disposed to be amused even when they are conscious of being deceived." He sold spectacle, not truth, and people lined up for it. Here's the thing, you should be offended. This whole setup is exploitative. It takes people who look different, who are born with conditions they had no control over, and parades them around like living props. And yet, some of them choose to be here, for money, for survival, for power. The scholarly debate. Was Barnum a master of exploitation or a twisted kind of liberator? Some historians argue he profited off the bodies and pain of the marginalised. Others claim he gave them a platform, a way to earn money, be seen, and take control of their image in a world that rejected them. You're not sure where you land on it. All you know is that the bearded lady seems less like a victim and more like a queen. The main event kicks off when an elephant stomps into the ring, painted with gold stars and a headpiece that looks like it used to be a rug. A man balances on its back while juggling torches. The crowd gasps. Children scream. You're impressed and mildly terrified. After the show, you wander the grounds. You see a fire eater, a man in a cage covered in tattoos who calls himself the Human Map. A woman billed as the Snake Witch of New Orleans, who does card tricks with a live boa around her neck. It's absurd, it's genius, it's everything the slums aren't. Flashy, strange, loud. You realise something too. This place is full of people like you. Poor, curious, tired. Not here to mock the freaks, but to forget their own freakish lives for a while. By nightfall, the lights are dimmed, the performers retreat, and the crowd disperses back into the soot-stained streets of reality. You walk home with sawdust on your boots and half a melted candy stick in your pocket. Mrs. Dooley asks where you've been. You tell her. She snorts. Used to work for a circus man once, she says. Didn't trust him. Teeth too white. You don't sleep right away. You lie there thinking about illusions, about how much people will pay to see a lie if it's wrapped in music and glitter, and how sometimes the lie is kinder than the truth. The women here don't get to be soft. Forget whatever romantic Victorian nonsense you've read in books about delicate ladies fainting in corsets and sipping tea in embroidered parlours. In the Bohemian slums of 1800s New York, the women you meet are made of wire, grit and spite. They carry babies on their hips, buckets in their hands, and insults on the tips of their tongues. And they do it all while dodging disease, debt, and the occasional drunk with wandering hands. This morning you're sent out to deliver a note for Mrs. Dooley. It's a favour. You owe her for that time she pulled you out of the cellar when the stairs collapsed. Again. The note's going to a woman named Marguerite who lives a few blocks over in a tenement slightly more crooked than yours. You find Marguerite in a room stuffed with fabric, needles, and the smell of boiling starch. She's a seamstress, or, as she calls herself, a threadbender. A French accent curls around her words like silk, even though she's sweating and swearing and sewing like her life depends on it. Because it does. Around her, 3 other women, 2 Irish, 1 black, are hunched over machines or hand-stitching buttons onto shirts for some uptown dry goods company. They don't look up when you enter. They don't stop. They are paid by the piece, and time is literally money. Historical fact. In the 19th century, poor women in New York had very few options. Sewing was one of them. Shirtwaists, collars, trousers. If you could stitch straight, you could earn just enough to not starve. But wages were abysmal, hours endless, and work often farmed out through shady middlemen who took a cut off the top. A good week might earn you a couple dollars. A bad one, nothing. Marguerite reads the note, sighs, and says to you, "Tell Dooley I'll be there Sunday, and tell her to bring the proper whiskey this time, not that cough syrup she swears is Irish." Then she hands you a shirt. Make yourself useful. You sew for the next 2 hours, badly. You prick your finger. Twice. Your stitches look like a drunk spider got tired halfway through a web. The women laugh, but it's not cruel. It's a laugh of yes, we've all bled on a cuff before. You leave with a new appreciation for the blistered fingers and sharp eyes it takes to make other people's clothes while yours fall apart. In the hallway, you run into Lottie. She's a regular face in your building, 22 maybe, sharp as a tack, jaw set like a bear trap. She's wearing a green dress that was probably new 5 owners ago and smells faintly of perfume and beer. She catches your eye and smirks. "Off to earn an honest living?" she asks. You shrug. "Define honest." She laughs deep and real. "If it gets you fed, it's honest enough." Lottie works night shifts. Not the kind with machines or fabric. She doesn't talk about it much, but you've seen her step out of carriages on payday and come back with bruises she pretends are from clumsiness. The other women look out for her, so does Mrs. Dooley. Quirky fact of the day, sex work was common in 19th century New York. Very common. The city was filled with brothels from fancy parlours catering to the elite to dingy back rooms in rat-infested tenements. But many women didn't work in organised houses at all. They worked alone, on the streets, or in hidden corners of dance halls and boarding rooms. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't safe. But sometimes it paid more in a night than sewing did in a month. There's an unspoken hierarchy, of course. The sporting girls with wealthy clients wore silk and had rooms with mirrors. The rest? They took what they could get. Lottie walks with you for a bit, talking about a guy who promised to take her out west and ended up pawning her boots. You tell her about the demon rat in the newspaper. She says she dated worse. Then she stops in front of a small boarding house with broken steps and a doorman who pretends not to see her. She turns to you and says, "Tell Dooley I'm not dead yet." Then she's gone. Here's the scholarly debate. Were women in the slums victims of a brutal system, or survivors carving space in it? Some say these women had no real choices and were crushed beneath poverty, misogyny and the law. Others argue they were resourceful, fierce and often more networked and strategic than the men around them. You're starting to believe both are true. Back at your building, you find Mrs. Dooley in a rare moment of rest. She's sitting by the window peeling potatoes with a knife that's seen too many winters. You tell her about Marguerite, about Lottie. She nods, quiet. Then she says, "When I was 16, I worked in a laundry. Burned the skin right off my hand scrubbing collars for men who never looked at me twice. That's where I learned. Men write the rules, but women do the bookkeeping. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds like something worth remembering. That night, you lie awake thinking about all the women you met today. Marguerite with her perfect stitches, Lottie with her bruised wit, the little girls in the factory you passed earlier, no taller than your waist, already with bent backs and broken dreams. There are no soft women here, there are strong ones, and that might be more impressive anyway. You're sick. Not, I think I need a nap sick. Not even bad oyster sick. This is full-body, teeth-rattling, dream-hallucinating, May the city have mercy on your soul, sick. You wake in a pool of your own sweat, shirt clinging to your back, hair damp, eyes sticky. Your breath comes in shallow little gasps like your lungs are hosting a miniature steam engine that won't shut off. Every bone in your body hurts. Your joints crack when you move. You're dizzy before you even stand up. Congratulations. You've joined the local hobby club, 19th century infectious diseases. You stagger to the wash basin and splash water on your face. It helps, a little. The reflection in the cracked mirror is not encouraging. You look like a cadaver that's been left out in the sun. Even Edgar, perched on the windowsill, looks worried. Or maybe hungry. Hard to tell. You don't know what you've caught. Typhoid? Maybe. Tuberculosis? That's always a classic. Could just be an aggressive flu. Or maybe it's a sampler platter. New York loves giving you combo deals. You try to pull on your boots. It takes 5 minutes. You have to lie down afterward. This is not going well. Eventually you limp downstairs. The building smells worse than usual, which is saying something. Mrs. Dooley sees your face and instantly clutches her chest like she's seen a ghost. Back upstairs, she barks. You look like you lost a bar fight with death and didn't even get a drink first. You try to argue. You need to work. You need food, rent, something. But she shoves a bowl of broth into your hands and points to the stairs. Go, now. Before you sneeze on someone's child and start another funeral, you retreat. Historical fact. Illness in 1800s. New York wasn't a question of if, but when. The city was a playground for disease, crowded housing, contaminated water, zero public health policies, and more rats than citizens. Colds turned into fevers, fevers turned into death, and there were no antibiotics, no urgent care clinics, and definitely no paid sick days. So what do you do when you're sick and poor in 1850s Manhattan? You sweat it out. That's literally it. You lie in bed. You drink lukewarm water that may or may not be clean. If you're lucky, someone feeds you soup. If you're really lucky, they don't rob you while you're unconscious. You sleep most of the day, in fits and starts. Dreams come in hot flashes, burning cities, coughing shadows, faces from the factory yelling your name through walls made of smoke. You wake with your sheets soaked. You think you see a small woman in your room at one point whispering a lullaby, probably a hallucination, unless it's that ghost from the chalk drawing. By evening, you've developed a cough that sounds like it came from a Victorian-era steamship. You sit up and try not to vomit. Everything aches. The broth is cold now, but you drink it anyway. Then you hear it on the floor below. Another cough, then another. Not from you. Someone else is sick. This tenement's turning into a fever hive. Quirky fact of the day, the phrase consumption was commonly used to describe what we now know as tuberculosis. It was called that because it seemed to consume people, eating away at their strength, their flesh, their voice. It was so common that it became romanticized in literature. If you were pale, sad, and coughing blood, congratulations. You were probably a tragic heroine, or just really, really contagious. You spend the night in and out of consciousness. Someone leaves a damp cloth on your forehead. You're not sure who. Maybe Dooley, maybe a spirit. Here's the scholarly debate. Were slum diseases a result of ignorance or neglect? Some historians argue people just didn't know how disease spread. Others say the elite did know, but didn't care to fix it for the poor. Building codes weren't enforced, sanitation wasn't funded, and public health wasn't a priority until it threatened the upper classes. You're too feverish to have an opinion, but if you did, it'd probably be a loud, angry one. By the second morning, your fever breaks, just like that. You wake up drenched, cold, and shaking, but better. You sit up, and the world stays upright. That's progress. You drink some water. Your hands don't tremble. You don't cough blood. You're alive. You're not fixed. You're not healthy. But you've made it through the worst. You think. You wrap yourself in a blanket and hobble downstairs. Mrs. Dooley hands you a fresh piece of bread without comment. She doesn't say she was worried. She doesn't say she sat up listening for your breath. She just says, you smell like soup. Go wash. Outside, the city's still moving. No one paused while you burned. Kids are playing in the gutter. Carts rattle past with cabbages and coal. Somewhere, a piano plays a song you don't know. You survived. Now you just have to survive again tomorrow. Riots have a sound. It's not what you expect. Not just shouting. Not just the heavy footfalls of a stampeding crowd. It's deeper, like a low-frequency hum that rises in your bones, even before you hear it with your ears. like the city itself is growling, teeth bared, hungry for chaos. You hear it before you see it. You're in line outside a bakery, stomach gnawing at your spine, trying to buy a loaf that probably contains more sawdust than flour. The man in front of you is arguing over price, voice rising. Then someone down the block yells, then someone else yells back, and then the crowd moves like it's one creature. You turn the corner and get hit with the full blast. A wave of bodies, fists, smoke, hats flying, bricks sailing, a bonfire burning in the middle of the street with someone's furniture. And it's not a party, it's a riot, and not just any riot. You've landed smack in the middle of the 1863 draft riots, although nobody's calling it that yet. Not officially, not while it's happening. Right now, it's just fire and fear. Historical fact, the US Civil War draft began in 1863, and New York, overcrowded, boiling with tension, reacted about as well as you'd expect. Poor men were being forced to fight in a war they didn't understand, for a government that barely acknowledged their existence. Meanwhile, the rich could buy their way out of the draft for $300, a sum so far beyond your reach, it might as well be on the moon. So now the streets are exploding. The mob is mostly Irish immigrants, working-class men furious at the injustice, the government, the war, and everything in between. But rage isn't clean. It doesn't stay in neat, righteous lines. It spills, it burns, it finds victims who had nothing to do with anything. You dodge into a doorway as the crowd surges past, faces twisted in fury, armed with bricks, clubs, bats, kitchen knives. Someone throws a bottle at a storefront window, glass showers the street, cheers erupt. Then someone screams, "They're coming!" and the crowd pivots. The police, baton-wielding, angry, already bruised and bloodied from earlier clashes. They don't arrive to restore order, they arrive to fight. The first clash is a blur, chaos wrapped in smoke. Batons swing, bricks fly. You see a man drop to the ground and get trampled. The bakery is looted. The woman behind the counter flees with her apron still on. You run. Not because you're guilty, but because in a riot the only real crime is being present. You duck through alleyways, scramble over barrels, splash through puddles, and end up in a back courtyard you didn't know existed. Rats scatter. You lean against the wall, panting, shaking. You're not alone. Beside you, a young black man crouches in the corner, bleeding from the shoulder. He eyes you like he's waiting for the next blow. You hold up your hands, palms out. "I'm not—" "I know," he says. Then spits blood onto the cobblestones. Doesn't matter. He's right. It doesn't. Because the riot's not just about the draft anymore. It's turning racial. The mob is looking for scapegoats, and black New Yorkers, already targets, are suddenly enemy number one. Quirky fact. During the worst days of the draft riots, mobs attacked black neighborhoods, orphanages, and individuals in the streets. Even white abolitionists and newspaper editors were assaulted. The violence was so widespread that many black families fled the city entirely. Some never returned. You help the man to his feet, and together you limp back to a quieter part of town, if such a place still exists. He doesn't tell you his name. You don't ask. You both understand survival doesn't leave room for introductions. When you finally make it back to your building, Mrs. Dooley is sitting on the stoop, armed with a broom and a glare sharp enough to draw blood. "What now?" she mutters, staring at the smoke rising from downtown. "First cholera, now this. Next it'll be frogs raining from the sky." You help the man upstairs. She gives him water, doesn't ask questions. She never does. Later that night, the streets are quiet, smouldering. The air is thick with soot. You sit by the window and watch the city breathe smoke like a dragon too tired to roar. Here's the scholarly debate. Were the draft riots a justified uprising of the poor or a shameful chapter of racial violence? Some say the rage was righteous, aimed at an unfair system that forced the powerless to fight a war they didn't choose. Others say the moment that rage turned against black citizens and the innocent, the cause was lost in blood and hate. You think maybe both are true. Desperation is a spark. But when it catches, you don't get to choose what burns. You close your eyes to sleep, but all you see are flames. You're not better yet. Sure, the fever broke, the cough calmed down, and your legs mostly work again, but something in your body still feels off, like you've been rearranged slightly wrong, or there's a tiny man living in your lungs playing the world's smallest accordion. So when Mrs. Dooley mentions a doctor who sets up a table outside the fish market twice a week, you raise an eyebrow. "He's no worse than the other ones," she shrugs. charges a penny and throws in a blessing for free. Last week he bled Tommy Capelli and told him his liver was angry. Tommy says he felt lighter, though he also passed out and hit his head on a barrel. You nod. That tracks. Because it's time you learned the grim truth. Medicine in 1800s New York is absolutely unhinged. You find the doctor easily. He's the one in the patched black coat that may or may not be covered in dried blood, hunched over a rickety table with a jar of leeches, a bowl of cloudy water, and a selection of tools that look more suited for carpentry than healing. There's a sign behind him, proudly painted in fading gold. Dr. Alphonse Beadle, practitioner of physic and phrenology. Cures of the blood, bile, brain and bowels. Guaranteed. You sit. You're already committed. He doesn't even ask what's wrong, just peers into your eyes, pokes your belly, then runs a hand over your skull like he's reading Braille on a cantaloupe. He murmurs. You've got a thick occipital ridge. That suggests melancholy, or guilt, maybe both. You stare at him. I've been coughing up grey stuff. Ah, a classic case of wandering humours. Your spleen's misaligned. We'll need to bleed you, possibly blister you. Maybe a light purging. And after that, I'll say a Latin word or two. It can't hurt. Historical fact. Medical science in 19th century America was still very much a suggestion. Germ theory, still fringe. Hygiene, optional. Most doctors believe disease came from imbalances in your four bodily humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile. So if you had a fever, they drained your blood. If you were sluggish, they purged your bowels. If you were coughing, must be evil air, or, as some called it, miasma. Dr. Beadle pulls out a lancet. It's dull and crusted and your instincts are screaming. But he's already slicing your arm open before you can protest. A little blood seeps out. There we go, he says proudly. Let the humours escape. You feel lightheaded. Not from the blood loss, yet, but from the realisation that this man could probably do dentistry with a hammer and not feel bad about it. He wraps your arm in a cloth that smells like vinegar and maybe sadness. Then he waves his hands over your head and whispers something in what might be Latin, but honestly sounds more like badly pronounced Italian meatball recipes. That'll be a penny, he says. You pay, because of course you do. You stumble away from the fish market, arm throbbing, skin pale and brain spinning. You pass a cart selling herbal remedies and tonics with hand-scrawled labels like Nostrum of Vital Fire and Mrs. Peg's Pulmonary Elixir, now with extra laudanum. You buy one. You don't even ask what's in it. You just drink it. It tastes like molasses and regret. You're not sure if you're cured or just mildly sedated. Either way, you're floating. Quirky fact. Most medicine sold on New York streets was unregulated snake oil. Patent medicines promised to cure everything from headaches to heartbreak, and many were laced with opium, cocaine or mercury. People loved them. Why wouldn't they? They worked, just not in the way anyone should have wanted them to. You drift toward the East River, sit by the docks and let the laudanum kick in. You watch the ferries glide past, smoke trailing behind like lazy ghosts. For a minute it's almost peaceful. Then a man beside you starts hacking uncontrollably. He spits into the water. It's red. You inch away. He shrugs. Consumption, he says, like he's telling you the weather. Been a year. Doctor says my lungs are drying out like raisins. You ask if the doctor helped. He grins with bloody teeth. Course not. But he gave me this cough syrup that makes me see stars. That's something, ain't it? Here's the scholarly debate. Was 19th century medicine ignorance, or just people doing the best they could with what they had? Some say doctors were frauds and fools, preying on the desperate. Others argue they were earnest pioneers, experimenting in a chaotic world, trying to push science forward inch by inch, even if a few patients died horribly along the way. You lie back on the wooden dock, arm still bandaged, brain still foggy. You feel better. Kind of. Maybe. Or maybe you're just stoned on whatever was in that bottle. It doesn't matter. Because here's the real truth. When your life is constant pain, overwork, and dirt, sometimes you'll take any cure, even if it's a lie in a bottle. Especially then. By the time you walk home, the sun is setting, the sky burning orange over a skyline of crumbling bricks and bent chimneys. Mrs. Dooley takes one look at your arm and sighs so hard you think she might pass out. Let me guess, she says. Beadle got you. You nod. She tuts, pulls out a bottle of homemade salve and starts rewrapping your wound properly. You're not dying today, she says firmly. At least not from that idiot's blade. You fall asleep with the faint smell of peppermint and garlic on your arm, and a stomach full of something that may or may not have been opium. You dream of floating rats, blinking stars, and Dr. Beadle chasing you with a spoon. You wake up with a clearer head, a tender arm, and the quiet knowledge that next time you get sick you might just take your chances with the rats. You catch yourself staring, not at anything scandalous. Not this time anyway. Just at a man across the street eating a roast chicken with a fork made of actual silver. He's sitting behind a glass window in a dining room glowing golden from gaslight. Clean clothes, clean fingernails, an actual napkin. The table's covered in polished wood, embroidered linens, crystal decanters, the kind of meal that looks like a painting. A whole bird, bread still warm from the oven, butter that's definitely not a week old, and something green that might be lettuce, or just some exotic garnish invented to make peasants feel bad. Meanwhile, you're chewing a piece of dried turnip you found in your pocket, and trying to remember the last time you ate something that didn't come with a side of invisible parasites. It's a special kind of torture, watching someone eat that well while your own stomach feels like it's eating you back. Welcome to the beautiful, violent food divide of 19th century New York. Historical fact. In the 1800s, New York was home to both some of the most lavish meals in the Western Hemisphere and some of the most horrifying levels of starvation. Upper Fifth Avenue was starting to become the playground of bankers, land barons and self-made millionaires. Just a few blocks downtown, people were dying of malnutrition, eating garbage, and boiling bones for soup. You've passed by the markets up near Union Square, where the stalls are filled with apples polished to a shine, fresh seafood nestled in shaved ice, and cheese wheels so big you could roll them down Broadway and cause a riot. The customers there wear gloves. They turn up their noses if the bread is more than a few hours old. You've also stood in line at the slumside bakeries, where bread comes in hard grey lumps and smells like it used to be something else entirely, where the milk is watered down and occasionally comes with floaters, where even the rats hesitate. You walk uptown today, not because you expect to buy anything, but because it's payday and the factory handed out wages that don't immediately dissolve in your palm. $2 full, an actual win. It's enough for new boots, or a warm meal or rent. Not all of those, pick one. Naturally you wander into Delmonico's, not inside, don't be ridiculous. But you press your face to the glass like a Dickensian orphan and watch. Inside it's a dream world. Candles flicker in brass sconces. A waiter in crisp white gloves carves roast duck at the table. Two ladies in silk sip champagne and nibble oysters, laughing like the world's never hurt them. You're tempted to lick the window. You don't. Barely. Delmonico's, by the way, is real. Historical fact. It was the fine dining experience in the 19th century America. The first restaurant to offer a menu, tablecloths and wine pairings. Their chef invented Eggs Benedict, Lobster Newburgh and, rumour has it, Baked Alaska. They had imported butter. Let that sink in. You meanwhile have margarine, and even that is suspicious. You manage to scrounge your way into a working man's lunchroom on the way back downtown. It's a no-nonsense kind of place. Wood benches, tin plates, soup that smells like it's seen better vegetables. You slap down a few coins and get stew, thick and greyish but hot. A slice of bread comes with it, surprisingly mould-free. It might not be baked Alaska, but it doesn't fight you back, so it's a win. You eat slowly, savouring every spoonful. You imagine you're in Delmonico's. You pretend the tin spoon is silver, the bread is buttered brioche, the stew is, well, anything but stew. A man beside you mutters, "Saw a boy eat his shoe last week." You blink. What? He shrugs. Boiled it first. Swears the sole had flavour. Then he dips his own bread into the soup and munches like he just said nothing odd. Quirky fact. People in the worst parts of Manhattan ate some truly wild things to survive. Shoe leather, cat meat, flour paste, sawdust bread, spoiled vegetables, and sometimes the occasional mystery meat stew that you really didn't want to ask about. If it didn't kill you immediately, it was considered food adjacent. And yet, a few blocks away, rich New Yorkers were holding lavish feasts with 12-course meals, champagne fountains, and waiters imported from Europe. There were private parties with lobster pyramids. Yes, lobster. Pyramids. The rich weren't just eating well, they were performing it, turning meals into theatre, while the rest of the city gnawed on bones like desperate dogs. Here's the scholarly debate of the night. Did the opulence of the elite inspire social progress, or fuel resentment? Some argue the visible wealth pushed reformers to demand better conditions for the poor. Others say it only deepened the chasm, making the city more combustible with each passing year. You lean toward the combustible theory, especially when you pass a restaurant trash pile on your way home and see a half-eaten roast tossed out with perfect apples and a chunk of cheese you'd commit petty theft for. You look around, no one's watching. You're not proud. You pocket the cheese. It's soft, creamy, a miracle. When you get home, you show it to Mrs. Dooley. She gasps like you brought back the Holy Grail. "Where'd you get that?" she asks. You lie. "Someone dropped it." She nods like that makes perfect sense and begins cutting it with a butter knife she sharpens on her boot. That night you eat like royalty. Bread and stolen cheese, washed down with weak tea and stronger silence. You share with the neighbour kids, and even Edgar gets a crumb. He sniffs it suspiciously, then drags it under the stove like a treasure. You fall asleep dreaming of roast duck, buttered rolls, and things you've never tasted but imagine in vivid, buttery detail. Maybe someday, or maybe just again from the garbage pile. Either way, you'll be watching. You see her on the street, barefoot and dragging a sack of coal bigger than she is. She's no more than 4 years old. Hair like a bird's nest, cheeks smudged with soot. A look in her eyes that says she's seen more than anyone that size should have. Her dress is half a dress, the hem fraying into threads that wave behind her like a torn flag. She's not crying, she's not whining, she's just working, and that's normal. You watch as she hauls the sack into a basement door. A man inside, grey-bearded, half asleep, grunts and flips her a coin the size of a button. She takes it without a word and walks off, sack dragging behind her like a dead dog. It hits you harder than you expect. Maybe because your stomach's full for once. Maybe because you slept more than 3 hours last night. Maybe because you're remembering how childhood used to mean something else. Here, it means labour. Historical fact. By the mid-1800s, child labour in New York City wasn't just common, it was foundational. Kids worked in factories, sweatshops, slaughterhouses, and as street vendors. They picked rags, cleaned chimneys, stitched clothes, hauled loads, and even stood in for adults in coal mines when grown men collapsed from exhaustion. If you were old enough to stand, you were old enough to work, and if you didn't eat. You keep walking. A few blocks down, you spot a pair of boys, maybe 6 and 9, scrambling into a garbage heap behind a butcher's shop. They're digging through meat scraps, giggling like it's a game. One pulls out something vaguely bone-shaped and holds it up like a trophy. Across the street, a group of girls huddle outside a laundry. Each has a basket nearly half their size. Their hands are red and raw, wrapped in cloth that does nothing. A woman steps out and yells, "Keep moving or I'll find someone who will." You catch the eye of one girl, she's maybe 8. She smirks. They don't want pity, they want shoes. Quirky fact of the day. There were actually child-sized boot-blacking boxes made in New York during this time, specifically because thousands of kids, some as young as 3, worked as shoeshine boys. They'd stand for 12 hours a day on busy corners surrounded by smoke, filth, and men too impatient to tip. And still, those kids learned how to hustle. Some even made enough to support entire families. Others didn't make it to 15. You stop at a street corner and watch a group of child vendors bark out prices like miniature auctioneers. One's selling newspapers, one's got apples, one's got nothing and is just trying to look useful. A carriage rattles past, splashing them with slush. They barely flinch. Here's the thing. People didn't just let kids work. They expected it. Poor families needed every possible income source. Kids were cheaper than adults, didn't complain, much, and didn't require contracts. Bosses loved them. Lawmakers ignored them. Reformers wrote about them. But writing takes time, and kids don't have much of that to begin with. You cut down a back alley and pass a tenement window where a child is sewing in the dark. Her fingers move automatically, mechanically, like she's part of the furniture. The man next to her, maybe her father, maybe not, is asleep with his mouth open, snoring. You remember your job at the factory, the one with the needle, the one with the noise. You remember thinking this is hell. Then you imagine doing it at 7. And now, suddenly it feels like maybe you had it easy. You make it back to your building and find Mrs. Dooley with a bucket of water and a child on her hip. The kid's name is Elsie. She's someone's cousin, someone else's sister, no one's current responsibility. Dooley's teaching her how to wash socks in a bucket without losing skin. She's got good hands, Dooley says, half proud, half defeated. Could be a washerwoman by 10. A washerwoman by 10. It sounds like a sentence. You sit on the stoop, watch Elsie scrub, watch her little hands turn pink then red. She doesn't complain. She sings, off-key, nonsense lyrics, something about birds and buttons. You ask Mrs. Dooley, what happens when she gets tired? Dooley snorts. Then she learns to be tired and fast, same as the rest of us. Here's the scholarly debate of the day. Was child labour a necessary evil in a broken economy, or a moral failure too easily excused? Some historians argue families had no choice, that kids had to work or they'd all starve. Others say the system could have changed sooner but didn't, because kids were invisible to the powerful and profitable to the greedy. You think the answer depends on who's holding the bucket and who's doing the scrubbing. That night you share a stale biscuit with Elsie. She thanks you and offers a button in return. It's my best one, she says. You tell her to keep it. She grins like you handed her a diamond. Then she goes to bed on a coat rolled up like a pillow. You lie awake for a while, listening to the sounds of a city built on the backs of children too small to fight back. Tomorrow they'll work again. They'll haul and shine and scrub and stitch. Because in this place, childhood isn't a phase. It's a brief, unpaid internship for adulthood. You try to escape, not permanently. You're not quite ready to walk into the woods and disappear with the raccoons. Though, let's be honest, some days it's tempting. No, today you're just trying to breathe. The slums are closing in. The stink, the noise, the endless parade of screaming babies, drunk fights, and mysterious puddles. So you head to the river, the East River specifically. It's the closest thing you've got to an escape route, or a poor man's beach, depending on your level of optimism. You walk for blocks, past factory chimneys belching out black fog, past children digging through trash heaps, past a man passed out face down on a pile of newspapers. The sky's low and grey like the city's ceiling is sagging. When you finally reach the riverbank, you stop and just stare. The river is not beautiful. It's wide, fast and filthy. Its surface slick with oil, dead leaves, and the occasional unidentifiable floating object. Let's not linger on that one with the suspicious shape. The water smells like a combination of rotten fish and burnt rubber. You know for a fact that several factories upstream use it as their personal garbage chute, but it's open and it moves, and that's more than you can say for most of the city. You take a seat on a half-rotted log beside a broken cartwheel and stare at the tugboats drifting in the distance. Somewhere across the water is Brooklyn. You imagine it's better over there. That's the trick with islands. You can always pretend the next one's got it figured out. Historical fact. The East River in the 1800s was less a river and more a moving landfill. By 1850, it was used for everything: washing, fishing, shipping, dumping. Sewer systems weren't fully developed, and human waste often went straight into the water. Still, people swam in it, fished in it, some even drank from it. Not smart, but desperate people don't always have choices. You look around and realise you're not alone. A few other souls are here too, sitting along the edge like human driftwood. A boy tossing pebbles, a couple sharing a cigarette, a man staring blankly at the water like it owes him money. You walk further down, toward the docks. That's where the real stories gather. You see a woman crying, clutching a baby wrapped in what looks like a coat sleeve. You see dockhands sleeping on coiled ropes. You see a preacher shouting about salvation to absolutely no one. But he's got the passion of a man who thinks God is hanging off the mast of a cargo ship. Then, something floats by. You squint. It's a body. Not the first you've seen. Not even the fifth. But this one's close. Close enough to see the face. Male. Young. Shirtless. Eyes open. Mouth slack. No one screams. No one even reacts. A dockhand glances, shrugs, and mutters, "Another floater. Just another Tuesday on the river." Quirky fact of the day. Bodies in the East River were so common they had nicknames. Floaters. Drowning, murder, suicide, accidents. Didn't matter. The current always brought them back. The coroner's office couldn't keep up. Some got buried in potter's fields. Others were simply lost. You back away slowly. You don't want to get close. You don't want to know his name. You can't. You already know too many ghosts. Here's the scholarly debate. Was the river a symbol of freedom or despair? For some, it was the way out. Boats led to other cities, other lives. For others, it was the end of the line, where debts, sickness, and heartbreak ended in a splash and silence. You pass a man tossing breadcrumbs into the water. He's muttering to himself. "It wasn't always like this," he says. "Used to be clean. Used to be blue." He looks at you. eyes watery. I saw dolphins once. You want to believe him, but a dead cat floats by and ruins the image. Eventually you find a quieter spot on the rocks and sit. You pull a crust of bread from your coat and chew slowly, letting the river's slow movement distract you. A gull screeches overhead. Someone far off plays a harmonica. It's off-key but somehow comforting. You stay there for hours just watching, thinking, breathing. You remember something a kid said to you once? Some street urchin with a too big coat and a coin collection made entirely of buttons. He said, "The river's like the city's drain." All the sadness runs into it. You didn't get it at the time, you do now. Before you leave, you throw your last breadcrumb into the water. It floats for a second, then sinks, gone without a ripple. Just like the boy, just like the others, you walk home slowly, back to the stink and the soot, back to the noise and the sickness. But at least your head feels a little clearer. Maybe that's all the river's good for, stealing some of your weight for a while, carrying it away with everything else the city's lost. You pass a man with a fishing rod on your way out. He nods at you like you're part of the club now. You nod back. Then he yells, "You gonna eat that?" You stop. He's pointing at your coat pocket where a small corner of bread is peeking out. You hand it to him. He grins. "Bless you." You smile even though you're pretty sure he's going to use it for bait. You hear music long before you see where it's coming from. It winds through the alleys like perfume. Soft, offbeat, a waltz that's forgotten it's supposed to be graceful. Somewhere a violin is arguing with a trumpet and both are losing. Then comes the laughter. Wild, tired, too loud. It pulls you toward it the way light pulls moths. Tonight, you're walking into one of the strangest corners of the city, the Bohemian district. Don't picture berets and coffee houses. Not yet. This is the 1800s version. Ragged dreamers stuffed into attics that double as art studios, drunks who call themselves poets, painters who can't afford paint, and writers who write manifestos on the back of unpaid rent notices. They call it Bohemia because barely functional chaos with a splash of genius doesn't look good on a flyer. You push open a warped door on Bleecker Street and step into a room lit entirely by candles jammed into beer bottles. The air smells like tobacco, turpentine, and ambition. Someone's reading a poem at the front of the room. You can't tell if it's good or terrible. Nobody can. Everyone's clapping anyway. A man with wild hair and ink-stained fingers waves you over. "You look lost," he says. "That's the entry requirement." He shoves a mug of something brownish into your hand. Drink, think, suffer. That's art. Historical fact. Greenwich Village, before it became the postcard version of Rebellion, was already the hangout for the city's bohemians. By the 1850s, artists and writers were moving into cheap boarding houses there. The rent was low, the landlords absent, and the neighbours too drunk to complain about noise. This was where Walt Whitman read Leaves of Grass aloud to people who pretended to understand it. You sip whatever's in the mug. It tastes like whiskey that's been through a fire, rescued, then drowned again for good measure. A woman with paint on her cheek leans in. "What's your art?" "Survival, you say?" She laughs. "Same." Around you the room hums. Someone's sketching the violinist on a scrap of newspaper. Another man is carving a tiny sculpture out of soap. Two people are loudly arguing about whether God is an artist or a critic. This place feels alive in a way the factories never do. Here, failure's expected, hunger's romantic, dirt's practically a fashion statement. You belong instantly. Quirky fact. Many of the self-proclaimed bohemians of the time weren't actually poor. Some were middle-class kids slumming it for inspiration. They'd play starving artists for a few years, write about it, then crawl back to the suburbs. But others were the real thing. Immigrant dreamers, runaway apprentices, women who refused to marry just to eat. The line between rebellion and survival was blurry at best. A lanky man jumps onto a chair and announces, "I have invented a new philosophy." Groans. Someone yells, "Add it to the pile." He continues anyway. "Pain is proof of life, therefore art should hurt." Everyone applauds because frankly they agree. Here's your scholarly debate. Was Bohemianism a genuine cultural revolution, or just poverty dressed up as philosophy? Some argue it birthed the idea of art for art's sake, rebellion against industry and modern creativity itself. Others say it was self-indulgent nonsense that only romanticised suffering without fixing anything. You watch a girl playing the fiddle with her eyes closed, her bow fraying to threads. She's smiling, even though she's missing 2 teeth. You decide the debate doesn't matter. Whatever this is, It's alive. Hours pass. Someone's reciting a poem about rats, our quiet roommates. Someone else paints a mural directly onto the wall with a mix of candle wax and wine. The painter yells, "It'll wash off when it rains," which, given the leaks in this building, might be tomorrow. You're swept up in it, laughing, clapping, adding nonsense lines to a group poem. You don't even notice when the violin fades, when the candles burn low, when the night outside slides into dawn. By morning, the Bohemians are collapsing where they stand. The philosopher's asleep face down in his beer. The painter is still arguing with gravity. The girl with the fiddle is curled up under a coat, humming in her sleep. You step outside into pale light. The street smells of yeast and rain. It's quiet now. Too quiet after that room of manic beauty. You walk home with ink on your sleeve and someone's borrowed scarf around your neck. Mrs. Dooley spots you on the stairs. "You look like a painting that lost an argument," she says. You grin. "I met artists," she snorts. "You met lunatics." Same thing. She doesn't disagree. As you lie down, you think about the people you met. Their wild eyes, their ridiculous certainty that words or colours could mean something. They might not have money, they might not live long, but they're trying to build a world that feels bigger than the one they're stuck in. Maybe that's enough. You fall asleep smiling, paint under your nails, a poem in your head that you'll never write down. Because in this city, survival is art, and tonight you were an artist. It's around 3 a.m. when you wake up to the smell of smoke, not burning down the building smoke. Not again, thank goodness. This is different. Faint, metallic, laced with something sharp. You sit up, disoriented. The room is dark. The only light comes from the half moon slipping through the cracks of your bent window pane. You hear the creak of footsteps. Not inside your room, but close. Someone's climbing the fire escape. You freeze. Then you remember. This is normal. In a tenement like yours, the fire escape isn't just for emergencies. It's a hallway, a shortcut, a place to smoke, cry, kiss, or escape. It's the closest thing to a porch most people here will ever have. You pad to the window and pull it open, wincing at the rusty groan. You peek out. A teenager is sitting on the landing, knees drawn up, staring into the alley like it's telling him secrets. He doesn't notice you, or he does and doesn't care. You step out and sit beside him. Below, the city is quiet in that eerie midnight way. No carriages, no shouting. Just the low groan of wood expanding and rats moving through the trash like whispering ghosts. "You ever think about jumping?" the boy asks, not looking at you. You pause. "From here?" He nods. You look down. 4 stories. Enough. "Not today," you say. "Me neither." Then he pulls a harmonica from his coat and starts playing a slow, wobbly tune. You sit and listen. You don't recognize the song. It's probably something he made up. Welcome to the complicated, unsteady relationship you have with the fire escape. Historical fact. Fire escapes became common in the mid-1800s as a citywide panic response to surprise fires. As buildings grew taller and crammed with more people, cities realized they might want a plan B when the stairs went up in flames. Iron balconies and ladders were bolted to brick walls, and suddenly everyone had an exit and an entrance. At first they were purely utilitarian, but over time they became something else, a refuge, a viewing platform, a second stage for the theatre of the streets. Back in your room, your fire escape has become your second home. You eat there sometimes, legs dangling. You've dried clothes on it, let soup cool on it, watched rain pool in its rusted corners, and when the building feels like too much, when the air inside is too hot, too close, you go outside. It's also your emergency plan, your back door to freedom. Because let's face it, if this place catches fire again, you're not waiting for the front stairs. Quirky fact. Some landlords in New York actually locked or removed fire escapes in the 1800s, claiming tenants were using them for immoral purposes. Translation: people were sneaking into rooms, holding secret meetings, or just using them like normal human beings trying not to melt inside a human sardine can. Landlords didn't like that. Safety, optional. Control, mandatory. You once knew a girl who used her fire escape to climb out every night and meet her boyfriend on the roof. They'd sit there under the stars, drink pilfered beer, and pretend the city was theirs. Then one day, the fire escape collapsed, just gave up and peeled off the building like a bad sticker. She broke both legs. Her boyfriend ghosted her. The city moved on. Your own escape creaks every time you step on it. The bolts are loose. One of the rails wobbles like it's not committed to its job. But it holds, mostly. Probably. You don't think about it too hard. Here's the scholarly debate. Were fire escapes a triumph of urban safety, or a lazy afterthought from a city that didn't want to fix its real problems? Some say they saved thousands of lives. Others argue they were slapped onto dangerous buildings as a band-aid, used as an excuse to ignore overcrowding and poor construction. After all, if there's a ladder bolted on the side, who cares if the walls are made of matchsticks? The kid beside you finishes his tune and tucks the harmonica away. Anyway, he says, you got matches? You hand him a stubby one from your pocket. He lights a cigarette and exhales like he's 60 instead of 16. You got family in the building, you ask? Used to. Just me now. He doesn't explain. You don't ask. You know what that means. You sit there a while longer, not speaking, just breathing in the cold, smoke-laced air. The street below glimmers faintly in the moonlight, wet and empty. Somewhere, a bottle breaks. Someone laughs. Then he stands, nods to you once and climbs up to the roof like he's done it 1,000 times. You sit a few minutes more, then crawl back inside, brushing rust off your sleeves. As you lie down, you think about your fire escape, not just as a ladder, but as a metaphor for your entire life. It's barely attached. It sways when the wind blows. It's held together with rust and hope, but it's yours, and when the flames come, and they always come, it's how you get out. You close your eyes and fall asleep with the window cracked open, the air sharp against your cheek, and in your dream, you're not running down the fire escape. You're climbing up. The city's wearing a new coat today, white, soft, and utterly deceptive. Snow has fallen overnight, blanketing the grime and rotting smells beneath something that looks almost clean. For a moment, everything seems gentle. The rooftops are dusted like powdered sugar. The crooked chimneys look like they belong on a holiday card. Even the alley cats walk softer, and then you step outside and nearly break your hip on a patch of ice. Yep, it's winter in the Bohemian slums, and this place does not handle it well. You grit your teeth and shuffle down the steps, one hand gripping the rusted railing, the other stuffed deep into your coat pocket with the last good mitten Mrs. Dooley knitted before arthritis claimed her thumbs. Edgar, ever practical, has vanished. No sign of him since the flurries started. You assume he's hibernating in a mattress somewhere, living his best sewer rat life. As you reach the street, you're immediately reminded of the rules of winter here. 1. Snow is not cute. It's heavy, turns to slush by noon, then freezes into sidewalk death traps by evening. 2. Frostbite is the new fashion statement. Gloves are rare, socks are holes pretending to be socks. 3. Chimneys smoke lies. Most buildings are too cheap or broken to provide actual warmth, so residents burn whatever they can get. Old shoes, chair legs, newspaper, sometimes mysterious animal parts. The result? Air that smells like regret and glue. You head toward the community water pump, your breath coming out in thick clouds. The streets are quieter now. Cold keeps people indoors, or in the basement where it's slightly warmer. A few bundled figures move like ghosts through the mist. One of them is a boy pulling a cart. His coat is 3 sizes too big and missing both sleeves. He's got strips of burlap tied around his hands. Inside the cart, firewood, or rather, wood-like items. Broken table legs, tree branches, a chair with 3 legs. 10 cents a bundle, he croaks through cracked lips. You pause. 10 cents is ridiculous, but he's not lowering the price because he doesn't have to. This is survival markup, and freezing is bad for business. You buy one. Historical fact. Winter was one of the deadliest seasons in the slums. Cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it killed. Hypothermia, pneumonia, frostbite, and carbon monoxide poisoning from makeshift heating all took their toll. There were entire years where the city ran out of coffins for the unclaimed dead who froze in alleyways. The firewood bundle is rough and splintery. You carry it home and stack it beside the stove you share with 3 other tenants. Only one burner works. The pipe is cracked. The knob might actually be possessed. But it's still a small miracle. You light it with a shaky match. The flame sputters, then catches. Heat, brief, uneven, glorious. Mrs. Dooley wanders in, wrapped in 3 shawls and a coat made from an old curtain. "Ah," she says, kneeling beside the stove like it's a sacred altar. "Bless this charred potato box." You laugh. Kind of. Your face cracks where your skin is chapped. Quirky fact of the day. To stay warm, people in the slums used tricks that would terrify a modern fire marshal. They filled metal pans with coals and slid them under beds. burned kerosene in coffee cans, lit candles in closed rooms. Some even used body heat as currency. Families would sleep 4 to a mattress, bundled together like spoons, stealing warmth from each other like thieves. You warm your hands until the sting fades. Then comes the real winter task, keeping the water moving. Frozen pipes are a luxury problem. You don't have pipes. What you have are buckets, and those freeze, so now it's a race. Refill, reheat, reuse. If you're lucky, you make it through the day without chewing on your washcloth to melt it. Outside, the snow keeps falling. A girl down the hall knocks on your door, her nose red, her hands hidden in the sleeves of her dress. "Can I stand by the stove for a minute?" she whispers. You let her in. 10 minutes later, there are 4 kids, a man with a limp, and one very pregnant woman all crowded into your tiny room, breathing like it's the best thing they've done in weeks. No one speaks. You all just sit there, eyes half closed, hands open toward the weak orange glow. Here's your scholarly debate. Did winters bring people together or push them further apart? Some argue hardship created community. People shared what little they had, watched over one another. Others say the opposite, that scarcity turned neighbours into enemies, hoarding food, wood, even warmth. You're leaning toward both. Because here, compassion and competition live in the same room. Often, literally. As evening settles in, the snow begins to ice over. The city goes quiet again, like it's exhaling. You step onto the fire escape, boots crunching on frost, and look out across the rooftops. Chimney smoke coils into the sky. Somewhere someone plays a sad, off-key tune on a violin. Down below you hear a voice mutter, "I told you not to eat yellow snow, you idiot," followed by laughter. The slums never stop, not even in winter. You crawl back into your room and pull a blanket over your knees. The fire's mostly out now. The stove clicks and pops. Your breath fogs the air. And just as you're about to drift off, Mrs. Dooley whispers, "Don't forget to keep your boots by the bed." Why? In case you have to run out quick. Winter's a thief. She's right. You fall asleep with one boot on and the other in your hand, just in case. You're woken by shouting, not the usual, "Get your filthy elbows off my stoop" kind of shouting either. This one's different, urgent, thick with panic. You sit up fast, heart doing that drum roll thing that says, something is very wrong. By the time you get to the window, the whole block is in motion. People are pouring into the street, some in nightgowns, some barefoot, all pointing down the road. You shove on your boots. Yes, the ones you slept with like a paranoid, but now you're feeling pretty validated. You stumble outside and follow the noise. At first you think it's another riot or a fire, or maybe even some politician's carriage got stuck in a sinkhole and the slums decided to make a holiday out of it. But then you round the corner, and you see it. A building has collapsed. Historical fact. Building collapses in the 1800s slums were terrifyingly common. Cheap construction, no inspections, overcrowding, and the sheer weight of unventilated misery often turned entire tenements into death traps. One cracked support beam, one soaked floorboard, and gravity would do the rest. This one was just like yours. 5 stories, red brick gone grey with time, families stacked inside like library books. Now, it's a pile of rubble, a crooked mess of beams, bricks, bed springs and blankets. Smoke rises from the wreckage. You smell plaster dust and burning wood, and something else, something human. You stand frozen as men claw at the debris, barehanded, desperate. Someone yells, "There's a kid in there!" and the panic ratchets up. A woman in a torn shawl is screaming so hard she's coughing blood. You recognize her. You bought matches from her son last week. A man beside you mutters, "Told the landlord it was shifting. He said the tenants were just getting fatter." You want to punch something. Him. The landlord. The sky. A boy emerges from the crowd carrying a cat, coughing and covered in ash. A cheer goes up. You don't know if it's relief or just the need to celebrate anything not dead. That's when someone grabs you by the arm. It's Marguerite, the seamstress. She's pale, shaken, wild-eyed. "Dooley sent me. She says the back wall on our place has a crack." You're running before she finishes. Back home you see it. On the 3rd floor, behind the stove chimney, spiderweb cracks creeping across the bricks like they're trying to escape. A fine mist of white dust falls with every gust of wind. You swallow hard. Inside, Mrs. Dooley is already packing her apron full of tea tins and sewing needles. "This building's going to fold like cheap laundry," she says without looking up. "We're leaving." Now. She doesn't wait. She shuffles to the stairs and starts yelling at anyone who will listen. Out! Out now! You want to be pancakes? Move your legs! You help. You knock on doors, grab arms, wake people. Some argue. Some don't even speak English. A few are too sick to walk. You carry one old man down on your back. His breath smells like licorice and despair. Half the building's on the sidewalk within minutes, wrapped in shawls, holding pots, birds in cages, children like sacks of flour. You stand in the street, looking up, waiting. The building holds. For now. Quirky fact of the day, landlords in the 1800 slums were notorious for ignoring warnings of structural damage. There were no building codes worth enforcing, and bribes kept most inspectors blind. If your tenement collapsed, the owner might face a fine, or they might just build another on the same spot and call it improved housing. Here's your scholarly debate. Were tenement disasters avoidable tragedies, or inevitable byproducts of urban growth? Some historians say New York expanded faster than its infrastructure could keep up, and slum housing was the only realistic solution. Others argue the city knew, chose to ignore it, and left the poor to pay in broken bones and buried children. You sit on the curb, shoulders aching, head pounding, dirt crusted in the corners of your eyes. Beside you, Dooley sips something that might be tea or might be whiskey. You know, she says, every time I think this city can't surprise me anymore, it pulls out a new trick. Like a magician with a grudge. You nod. You're too tired to speak. Around you, the other tenants begin to settle, some muttering, some praying, some arguing over who gets to sleep closest to the warm side of the street. A boy offers you half a biscuit. You take it. That night, you sleep under the stars. Well, the stars and the dull orange glow of gas lamps and the occasional shout of someone getting mugged. But it feels wide open in a way you haven't felt in weeks. No walls, no ceiling, no guarantees. Just you, the cracked sky, and a city one breath away from falling in on itself. Morning comes like a hangover with teeth. You wake stiff, cold, and sore from sleeping on what you now realise was not a blanket of rags, but a pile of damp laundry that may have been alive. Someone's rooster, not anyone you know, has taken up screaming duty 2 feet from your head. You try to sit up. Your back cracks in 3 languages. Your building didn't collapse in the night, and that's the good news. The bad news, the crack is worse, the landlord is still missing, and nobody knows where they're sleeping tonight. Some families have already fled. Others squat nervously nearby, like the building is a wounded animal they can't quite bring themselves to put down. But you're not staying here much longer. That much is clear. The slums chew you up slowly. That's their secret. Death by 1,000 leaks, by 1,000 skipped meals, by cold drafts and the quiet sound of hope slipping out a window. But somehow, you're still here. You find Mrs. Dooley on the stoop, surrounded by a half-packed suitcase and her usual supply of complaints. Got a cousin in Brooklyn, she says. Says I can stay, long as I don't mind chickens in the kitchen. Do you? She snorts. Depends. Do the chickens mind me? She's serious, though. She's leaving. Maybe not forever, but for now. The building's a ticking clock, and her body's too old to be playing beat the bricks every night. You help her load a pushcart with her things. A chipped teapot, 3 shawls, a tin of buttons, a book with no cover. She pats your cheek. Don't get sentimental, she says. The city isn't. You watch her wheel away down the street, swearing at pigeons. And just like that, one of the pillars holding up your corner of the world is gone. Historical fact. Displacement was a way of life in the 1800 slums. Buildings were condemned, landlords went bankrupt, neighbourhoods were bulldozed for improvements. Immigrant families moved constantly, often with no warning. Their addresses changed like seasons. Sometimes they simply vanished from the records, lost to history except in whispers. You spend the rest of the day looking for work, walking through patches of city so familiar they feel like an extension of your skin. You beg at one factory, argue at a print shop, and nearly get trampled by a horse-drawn fire wagon screaming past with bells clanging. By mid-afternoon, you find a man outside a bakery who says he'll pay a nickel an hour to sweep ash out of the ovens. You don't think twice. It's hot, miserable, and you leave looking like you crawled out of a chimney. But when he slaps a nickel into your hand, it might as well be gold. You buy a roll, eat it warm, small victories. Quirky fact. The phrase nickel and dime originally came from exactly this kind of wage. Piecemeal labour that paid a few cents at a time. You might earn a dime loading crates, 2 nickels sweeping stairs, and a single penny for delivering a message. By the end of the day, if you weren't bleeding or robbed, you You might even eat something with protein in it. You walk back to your tenement and it hits you all over again. Half the windows are dark. The usual noise is gone. No one's arguing. No one's playing harmonica. Even Edgar hasn't shown his face. The building isn't dead yet, but it's whispering goodbye. Inside, you pack. There's not much. Your coat, 2 shirts, a spoon, the harmonica someone gave you at the Bohemian gathering, and a crumpled drawing of the tenement you sketched one night when you couldn't sleep. You run your fingers along the wall before you leave. It's a dumb, soft gesture, but it matters. This place hurt you, but it also held you. You step outside just as it starts to snow again. Here's your final scholarly debate. Were the slums of 1800s New York a pit of despair, or a crucible for resilience? Some say they were evidence of the city's failure, proof that progress left the poor to rot. Others argue the people who survived them shaped the heart of America itself, gritty, stubborn, endlessly adaptable. You look around one last time at the bricks that leaned and groaned, the railings you climbed, the doors that slammed and stuck, the kids who learned to curse before they learned to read, the ghosts you never asked for but learned to live beside. You survived it. Not cleanly, not safely, not always with grace, but you did. And now, you take your first step away. You don't know where you'll go next. Uptown, downtown, maybe even Brooklyn. You hear the rats are fatter there. But wherever it is, you'll go with soot under your fingernails, a limp in your step, and a heart that's learned to keep beating in broken places, because you've been forged in fire escapes, in hunger, in cracked walls and louder laughs. You've stared down the city at its worst and dared to wake up again the next day. You've survived the Bohemian slums, and that makes you unstoppable. You walk until your legs ache. The snow keeps falling, soft as breath, covering your tracks as soon as you leave them. You pass shuttered shops, silent tenements, half-lit windows. The city's heart is still beating. Slow, rough, but steady. Above you, the gas lamps flicker. The wind hums low through alleyways like a lullaby only New York knows how to sing. Somewhere in the distance, a violin plays one last lonely note. Might be a dream, might be a ghost. You turn your collar up and keep moving. Your journey through the Bohemian slums is done, for now. You've walked their crooked streets, shared fire escapes with poets, danced with hunger, laughed in the shadow of collapsing walls. You've learned how to survive not because you were taught, but because the city demanded it, and you answered. So if you're lying there now, tucked under blankets that feel a little too thin, listening to the hum of your fan or the creak of the house, remember this. You come from strong stock, maybe not by blood, but by spirit. You're part of a long, stubborn line of people who've looked at the impossible and said, "Fine, I'll do it anyway. Sleep easy knowing that. Rest knowing you made it. And if you dream tonight, let it be of warm bread, dry boots, soft music, and one very grumpy landlady watching over you with a broom in one hand and a heart of gold in the other. You're safe now. The city's behind you. The story's over. Time to let go just for a while. Close your eyes, breathe in, and let the night carry you gently away."